I'd like to call to order the May 23rd, 2023 Richland 2 regular board meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp,
I move to approve the agenda for the May 23rd, 2023 regular board meeting.
is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. Okay, and mine just, it came up twice, and the second time it said no, but I voted yes the first time. And I'm not. Okay, why don't we just do a hand vote, since we seem. Yeah, let's just do a hand vote just to confirm that everything, all in favor, raise your right hand.
Right, but I still want to make sure I'm okay, so when we come back out.
All those opposed? So my vote was a yes. It's showing, oh, okay. It initially showed up there no. So, all right. So there's 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. May I have a motion for executive session?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing student admission requests into the district's adult education program, student appeals, student permanent expulsion, employment recommendations, and certified releases, and employment matter regarding the termination of a professional employee, receipt of legal advice regarding superintendent compensation, and receipt of legal advice regarding employee contracts.
And receipt, there's item 3.9.
And receipt of legal advice regarding a parent grievance.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Mrs. Porter to convene an executive session. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Nash, if you'll confirm the motion.
That's correct.
Board members, please vote.
No.
And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We'll now convene an executive session. May I have a motion to adjourn executive session?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp.
I move to adjourn executive session at 6:26 p.m. and resume public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. Porter. Is there any discussion? As there's no discussion, board members, please vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. Item 4.1, our inspirational moment and Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. McFadden.
Good evening, everyone. Let me grab my papers. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from a Girl Scout group. Simone Williams is a lovely wife and proud mother of 3 girls who attends Richland 2 School District. Simone has always been a volunteer and helper within her community. She is the president of the PTO at one of the Richland 2 schools. Simone was a Girl Scout herself many years ago and is now a leader with Girl Scouts Mountain to Midlands. She has been a Girl Scout leader for 8 years. Simone leads Troop 1685 as part of the Mountain to Midlands Service Unit 644 under Community Development Manager Brittany Williams and Service Unit Manager Nicole Miller English. Simone is currently a multi-level Girl Scout Troop 1685 from daisies to seniors. She has one co-leader, Tarika Weeks, that has been a leader with her for over 3 years, and a community volunteer leader, Shanada Wright Sanders, who has lent her helping hands for over 3 years as well. Simone, along with her co-leaders, currently leads 20 Girl Scouts and has a troop as large as 35 or more girls. Please come up, ladies.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll be giving a little information in regards to Girl Scouts and our history. Girl Scouts has a long history of showing support for their country, and it started at the source of our beloved Juliet Daisy Gordon Lowe. Our amazing founder with a lot of things. She was brave, intimate, giving, loving, passionate, and outdoorsy, just to name a few. She also showed her patriot through and through with her always on focus and duty, selflessness, and service. Today, Girl Scouts continue to uphold Daisy's traditions of patriotism by making cards and sending care package, including our yummy Girl Scout cookies, of course, to all of our service unit servicemen and women. Participated in Memorial Day parades, 4th of July and Veteran Day parades, and other activities across the country. We've also taken part in flag retirement ceremonies, placing flags at local cemeteries, and so much more. All of this is helping to build a sense of pride in our country and in its rich history, while also nurturing important skills for many of the greatest leaders who stand to model its future's Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts also offers badges at every grade level that helps girls learn to celebrate their communities, their towns, their states, and their country. The badges that we have are Celebrating Community for our brownies, Inside Government for juniors, Finding Common Grounds for cadets, Behind the Ballot for seniors, and Public Policies for our ambassadors. Patriotism, citizenship, and community service are our core elements of Girl Scouts experience. Every female Secretary of State in the U.S. history is a former Girl Scout. 58% of our women in 116th Congress are also Girl Scout alumni.
Hello, my name is Renaya Simone. I am a senior in the Girl Scouts, and I am here to tell you about some of the things me and my fellow sisterhood have done that go with patriotism. During the flag ceremonies, we do flag ceremonies during our bridging, rededication, and induction. We say the Pledge of Allegiance with our promise and law. We participate in parades. We also do cookies for soldiers. And we also do community service, which go along with cleaning up parks, blessing bags, food drives, and having Grandparents' Day. We have toured the State House. We have met one of the judges in our counties. We lay wreaths at Fort Jackson Cemetery during the holidays. We also visit community elderly homes and do crafts and games with them. I, along with my other Girl Scout sisters, have also earned our silver badge by rebeautification my elementary school's courtyard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies, if you don't mind, can you come up here so we can see your badges? Just walk right here.
So with our senior, she also has her cadet badges on the bottom, and then she started her senior badges to the top. And then on the back is her fun patches that we've gone through, along with her fall product sales and cookie sales achievements. And this is our brownie, and she has all of her badges that she went to do with her self-awareness and leadership skills that we do throughout the year. And she also has on the back all of her achievements from fun patches and cookie sales. And then we have our daisy, which is where all of our kindergartners to first grade starts out, and they get all of their petals on the side, which is basically the same as each of the girls with learning first aid, courageous and caring, and being helpful and using resources wisely. So each of these petals represents one of those. And then on the back is the fun patches that she received for selling cookies and fall products.
Thank you all so very much. I appreciate that. My daughter went through Girl Scouts, and it takes a lot of work to get to those patches, so they have been putting in the work. Thank you all so very much for coming.
And again, I'll just reiterate Mrs. McFadden's words. Thank you so much, Simone family. Moving on to item 5, unfinished business, no action requested. 5.1, superintendent search, stakeholder executive summary. Dr. Scott.
Good evening, everyone. We do have Mack and Jake Law Firm here, and they're going to present the results of the survey that you guys had an opportunity to take. So we look forward to hearing the results and putting in the work. Thank you so much. Dr. Stein.
Good evening, board members and audience. I tell you, I sat there listening to our Girl Scouts present, and I just have a huge smile on my face. And those young ladies are the reason that we're here. It's so easy to go out there and present the Richland 2 school district. It's easy for me as one of your search consultants to tell prospective superintendents why this is a great school district, because it's about the kids. And I'm delighted to be able to present to you this evening what we call an executive summary of the stakeholder report. I had the pleasure of spending 3 days in the district a couple of weeks ago, and we met with over 200 of your patrons, staff, and students. We met with parents, administrators, teachers, community members, business and community leaders, support staff, every possible patron we could think of. We tried to meet with representatives of those groups. And during those meetings, we asked 4 questions. The 4 questions we asked were, what are the good things about the greater Columbia community? Because, you know, when people apply to be superintendent of the Richland 2 school district, it's a two-way street. You want to interview candidates, well, they want to check you out too. They want to know what are the good things about coming here and settling in the Columbia area, and specifically in the Richland 2 school district. So we asked them, what are the great things about the about the Columbia community? We also asked, what are the good things about the school district itself? The 3rd question we asked is, what issues should the new superintendent be aware of as he or she comes into the school district? And the 4th question we asked is, what qualities and characteristics are you looking for in your new superintendent? Very similar, that 4th question, to the question that the board tackled when we met on May 8th, and you developed the criteria that you're looking for in your new superintendent. All of that information is being compiled in a very lengthy report that you will receive. I hope to have it to you, board members, by the end of this week, Thursday or Friday, and you'll receive it in a PDF that will be emailed to you. We want you to have it as a board first. It's going to be a very lengthy report, I would guess, somewhere in the range of 130 to 150 pages, so that you can digest it and have time to really read through it and see what the community had to say. It will consist of all of the notes that we took through our meetings. It will also consist of all of the responses that patrons made in the stakeholder survey responses. I believe we had over 375 responses to the survey, anonymous survey. But what we'd like to give you tonight is what we call an executive summary. It's a flavor of what we heard from all those stakeholder groups, so that you can kind of understand and start getting a flavor of what the patrons had to say from those over 200 people that we met with. Dr. Harris is with me via Zoom. Tony, are we set up technologically? Okay, and so what he and I are going to do is we're going to take turns going through and sharing with you the main themes that we heard in response to those 4 questions. Hello, Dr. Carl Harris is with me. He's my co-consultant on this search. And we're going to share with you the good things, first of all, that we heard about your community. So in response to that question, and I have to tell you, it's really exciting for us because the responses were very consistent, very congruent across the groups. So here are the things that we heard in response to the question, the good things about your community. People described the community in general as being one that represents a great deal of diversity, that there are a lot of colleges and universities, including USC and many HBCUs in close proximity to Richland 2 and in the area, that everyone is friendly and cares about each other, that there are many things to do, including a great zoo, museums, concerts, arts, and entertainment, that this is an almost ideal community because you're 2 hours from the beach, 2 hours from the mountain. It's easy to get to places for relaxation and just to get away, but it's easy to get to them because they're just 2 hours away. That you're close to larger metropolitan areas such as Atlanta and Charlotte, 3 hours from Atlanta, 2 hours or an hour and a half from Charlotte. That it's a multiracial, multicultural, multi-ethnic community, and all are celebrated here. That we have a lot of military connectedness in this area, and there's a low cost of living. So those were themes that we heard very consistently across the stakeholder groups in response to the question, tell us the good things about your community. Dr. Harris is now going to share with you the themes that we heard to the next question. Dr. Harris? Dr. Harris, I think you're muted. Can you hear me? Tony, do you think I need to turn up the volume on my end? Are you muted, Dr. Harris? Excuse me 1 second. I think I can sort of hear him coming through my phone. So I'm wondering if I turn up the volume, if that's going to help. He won't be heard unless I can hear him here. Can you unmute, Dr. Harris? I am not muted. Oh, there we go. It's coming through my phone. Should I give you my phone to put through the mic?
Dr. Harris,
Yes, I can hear you well.
go ahead and speak for us, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Can you all hear him?
I wonder if there's a way to get rid of that.
I can
Technology is wonderful when it works. We apologize for the glitches.
My computer has frozen. Hold on. This one.
Okay.
Okay, give it a try.
Okay, Dr. Harris, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Dr. Harris.
Okay, if you can hear me, I'll go ahead. Board members, as my colleague stated, I really enjoyed my time in the district, and I get to share with you some of the comments that were received in regards to good things about the school district. And I must say up front before I make my comments, your community, everyone that we talk to, they are very, very proud of the Richland 2 school district. So I just want to highlight that as I get into my comments. So the question was really focused on telling us good things about the school district. And over, we heard that there were so many talented, dedicated, and hardworking teachers. The magnet school programs that you have in place, there is no doubt people really value those programs and fully understand and appreciate the fact that students have access to this level of programming. There were lots and lots of comments about the students, having great interest, again, being able to tap into the multiple programs that the district offer. Lots of comments about committed educators not focusing on time, but focusing on their efforts. The facilities, there were many, many comments about the beautiful facilities that exist in the Richland 2 community. And, over and over, we heard a resounding commitment that comes from the community as a whole in regards to making sure that students have really, really great facilities to be educated in. There was a strong focus on technology that is highly recognized. There's great diversity in the district, and that diversity ranged from the community to the students and the staff. Lots of comments about parent engagement, more parent engagement at the elementary middle level, and there was also comments about focusing on greater parental engagement at the senior high level. The community support for the schools, as I mentioned earlier, was a big highlight. And also from the teacher and staff perspective, there were lots of comments about opportunities for professional growth. And then the last thing I'll mention here was the overwhelming support from the community. That there were community partnerships that really played a major benefit to the school district, and that is one thing that we heard over and over that they hope will continue. Did you hear all of that pretty well?
We did, Dr. Harris. Thank you. Okay. Now, we are in an education environment, and we all know that we come to school to learn and grow and learn from our mistakes. One of the things that you, I hope, are going to really like about this report that you're going to get is that it's going to be loaded with even more great things about the community and great things about the school district. Everything that you've heard so far are things that help us go out and recruit and talk with candidates. And we've both talked with several candidates already who are excited about applying for the position. I am happy to report to you that we already have 20 applicants for this position, and it does not close until the 31st. That's a lot for a superintendent position. So you should feel really good about that. But we can only grow and improve if we're willing to look inward at things that we need to improve on. What I'm about to share with you are some things that are going to sting a little bit. And I want you to try to hear them and say, okay, these are growth areas. These are things that we need to work on with our new superintendent, and maybe even as a team of board members and with our staff and community, because we can only ever get better if we really look inward. You may be sitting there thinking, why is she saying all that? Just get on with it, Sklayerstein. But I want you to hear this, because I'm telling you in advance, some of this is going to hurt a little bit. When we ask the question, what issues should the superintendent be aware of as he or she comes into the district? There were probably, the things I'm going to share with you were consistent across stakeholder groups. These were common themes and concerns that were raised. Conflict and dysfunction of the school board. That the board needs to govern and not try to manage the school district. That people are leaving the district based on the behavior of the school board. And that there is a lack of trust in the board. That the morale of staff is really low. And all those things, those 5 bullet points, if you will, are all intertwined together. Other themes that were raised: safety issues in the schools. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to any of you. Behavior and discipline issues. Mental health issues impacting kids and staff. I don't know that it's going to make you feel any better, but this is an issue in every school in the country right now. That it's hard to recruit teachers, therefore we're dealing with overcrowded classes. The retention of teachers and staff. That politics play a significant role in how decisions have been made. We are not comparable to other districts in terms of employee pay. And the magnet program is not accessible to students who cannot provide their own transportation, and therefore it's inequitable to all students. Those are the main issues that we heard from people that said these are things the superintendent should be aware of as he or she comes into the district. I want to say to you, completely resolvable. Completely resolvable. And there's work that can be done right this second, and work that you will do together with your new superintendent. The next question, and the last question we posed to stakeholder groups, was what skills, qualities, or characteristics should the new superintendent possess to be successful here? And Dr. Harris is going to share those with us.
Before I start sharing the responses, I would like to say to the board, I think you will hear a lot of what you decided to be the criteria embedded in the comments, which for me was really encouraging, because the criteria that you established and that you want for your new superintendent is reflective in the comments that came from the stakeholder groups also. So what we heard over and over was a leader that was visionary, commitment to integrity, a leader who was visible, and that's being visible throughout the school district, being inside and understanding truly how schools operate on a day-to-day basis. They talked a lot about having a courageous leader, a leader who would make decisions that were the right decisions and not be overly influenced about whether it was going to make someone unhappy if it was the right decision to be made. They asked for, they wanted a collaborator, someone who could collaborate with multiple groups and multiple individuals. They want a leader who is patient and someone who is a good listener. They asked for a leader that is experienced, and this was we heard this multiple times. Someone who had been a teacher, fully understood the classroom and the schools and how schools operate. They want a leader that is fearless and a great advocate for children. They want a relationship builder, a communicator, a problem solver, someone who is respectful and fair to everyone. They wish for a leader who will be transparent, someone with strong character, who is honest, approachable, who is a servant leader, and will hold individuals accountable for the role that they serve within the district. So that kind of sums up the qualities and the characteristics that we heard over and over again. And again, as I mentioned, I think they are all reflective in the criteria that you as board members worked on and agreed upon. Thank you.
The last thing that I will share with you is that when you receive the stakeholder report, this executive summary will lead off that report. So everything that we've just shared with you, you will have in the report, and then you will have by stakeholder group what we heard from every group, because Dr. Harris and I took turns. One of us would facilitate the group, the other one would type feverishly to capture what every group said. And sometimes we would stop and ask participants in the group, could you repeat that? I want to make sure I captured it exactly the way you intended it to be said. So you will have what all of the stakeholder groups said by administrators, it'll be in there alphabetically, administrators, parents, community members. I know I'm not saying it alphabetically, but community members, business and community leaders, and so forth. Students, we always love meeting with students, and what they had to say is in the stakeholder report. And then the last section of the report, and probably the largest section of the report, is what people shared on the stakeholder survey. And there are lots of, I've read every single comment, because what we do is we go through and we eliminate any proper names or any vulgarities. There really were not any vulgarities, I'm happy to report, but there were some proper names or some things that would be identifiable to a particular school or a particular leader, and so those things we removed. Other than that, we left it as people submitted it. Any references to the prior superintendent, we left. But other than that, if there were references to a specific leader, unless it was a compliment, we removed. So you'll have all of that, and I hope to have it to all of you board members by Thursday so that you have time to review it, and then we will send it to Dr. Franklin so that it can be published on your district website on Tuesday after the holiday, and it will go on the Mac and Jake website on Tuesday as well. All of this in the spirit of transparency, and I encourage you to use the document as a learning tool and as a guide to next steps for how can we get better. Don't lament, oh, I can't believe somebody said this about us, or I can't believe somebody said this about so-and-so, but use it as a tool to improve. Because I can tell you, I have room for improvement, and I bet you every single person in this room has room for improvement in some way or another. And that's what we're about as educators. And if you look at it that way, I think the sting will be just a little bit less. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I thank you so much for your attention and your graciousness this evening.
Board members, any questions or comments?
Yes, just a question. Based on the conversation that I had with you, this presentation seemed to be a little different than what I had expected. And I know you mentioned that you were going to actually share comments and share things that were on the survey, and we didn't do that. And what I don't want is, my colleagues always talk about accountability and transparency, and what I don't want is what you shared and then the report to look totally different and not be shared here, so we can all have an opportunity to provide feedback. And then I know that people always say, if you don't want someone to know something, put it in a book or put it in something. So I just want to make sure in a transparency mode that the public goes back to read what you didn't share tonight, so they can have an understanding of this 100-page report, or how many pages it is that you guys put in the work to do, and for the work that we have to do as a school board, because I kind of expected more based on the conversation that I had with you, and we didn't get all of that. But I encourage the public to go back and read. How many pages did you say?
I don't know how many pages it will be because the office is still putting it together. The only thing we have to present this evening is the executive summary, which is what we've just presented. I wanted to share with the board the information about the board so that it would be received and not hurt quite as badly.
Okay. And Dr. Scott, perhaps we have the webpage now for the superintendent search, so somehow that could be put on the report on the link or
Right.
whatever.
The complete report will be, I'm anticipating the report will be somewhere between 135 and 160 pages, but I don't know exactly how long it will be yet because the office is still compiling the whole report. The whole report is not compiled yet because I literally this afternoon spoke with the office about the final survey data, what I just shared with you about removing any proper names and that sort of thing. But the executive summary is the only thing we typically share in open session. What I spoke with you about was just wanting to make sure that I was being considerate. Dr. Harris and I wanted to make sure we were being considerate of the board's feelings because so much came up under issues that were specific to the board and work the board needs to do. So I'm sorry if there was confusion, but that is the only thing I was wanting to present to the board.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Oh, Mrs. Nash.
Thank you so much for that. And then just the only question I had is just so people know where the data comes from. Is the survey just for Richland 2, or can anybody around take the survey?
Well, the survey was posted on your website and the Mac and Jake website. Anyone who went to the Richland 2 website and clicked on the link, it would automatically take them straight to Mac and Jake. It's a SurveyMonkey survey. It's compiled by McPherson and Jacobson, and while it's specifically for Richland 2 patrons and community, anyone, I suppose, could have taken the survey, but I doubt that most people who weren't part of Richland 2 had interest in completing the survey. The responses are very specific to Richland 2, as you will see once you get the report.
No other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Trapp.
I do want to make one comment. I appreciate all the information about the board, and quite honestly, any of us that have a Facebook account have heard a lot of it already. It's really not a shock. I mean, it's good to hear it though, but because we do know how people feel about these things.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
One other, I'm sorry I didn't mention this. We will have hard copies for you of the report. They will get printed and I will distribute those to you on the 12th of June when we meet to share candidates with you that night as well.
right.
So some people like a hard copy and you'll have that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, item 6, consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp,
I move to approve the consent agenda for the May 23rd, 2023 regular board meeting.
is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. Washington to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp?
I would like some clarification on something, and I don't know, so I want to ask a couple questions. Obviously, 6.2 and 6.3, we are affirming something or approving something. On 6.4, on the update for capital improvements, when we vote for this, what are we voting on? In other words, I looked over that, and it seems just like it's information, and I almost question that's shouldn't be in here where we're voting to approve or disapprove something. Am I looking at this wrong, or is that?
Well, and that's a great question. I think it's put in here so that the board has information instead of the presentation. And so it's put in to confirm that we've read it and are fine with it. But that's a great question.
But when we vote in affirmative on this, we're not authorizing the things that are taking place, and if we vote
No,
negative, we're not.
it's like the minutes. We're approving
Okay.
that the minutes are correct.
Okay.
Any other discussion? As there's no discussion, the board will vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. We're moving on to item 7, public participation. Before we begin, I will remind our speakers that each person is limited to 3 minutes and that our meetings are streamed live and recorded. According to policy BEDH, comments from public should not include gossip, defamatory words, or abusive and vulgar language. The policy also prohibits in public session any expression of personal complaints about individual school personnel or any other person connected with the school system. Specific student or personnel issues should be handled through the appropriate procedures as indicated in district policy. Questions asked during public participation typically will be referred to a staff member for a response at a later time. And tonight's first speaker is Ethan Lopez.
Good evening, everyone. So I did write something, but something came to mind that I thought was more important than that. Last school year, I took a history class at Bridgeview High School. All of my teachers were amazing, of course, and so are mine now at Westwood High School. And come to find out, my history teacher, she was amazing. It was her second year teaching. Her first year was doing online because COVID was happening, and everyone loved her. All the students, wanted to come to class. There were a few students missing from her class. She just made everyone feel so important and treated us like, we were human beings. And to hear now that she would have administrators come into her classroom, tell her what an embarrassment she would be if one of you or district personnel would have walked into her classroom is quite concerning, especially when everyone loved her. This drew her out of the classroom, out of education entirely, because this district continues to hire people who do not respect our teachers or give them the respect or the support they all deserve. I've seen this profoundly happen at Ridgeview High School and at Westwood High School. I see kids cuss at teachers, get into fights, threaten other students, and are allowed back into school the next day. And that's why we've seen the stabbing at Ridgeview High School. It's because administration didn't do their job and let them back into the school. Or unfortunately, we had someone sent to the hospital being stabbed 4 times. Administration was made aware of this threat the same day of the fight, but refused to do their jobs like the a lot of our administrators do. Most of the administration at Westwood High School has been pretty nice. They haven't been too bad, but I do see a lot of lack of communication between teachers and administration all across this district, and it's really concerning, especially when we have students who come to school to get away from an abusive environment and just walk right into another one. And it's really sad. And I know if this continues to happen next school year, and especially if I have a job, and I would be fired if I didn't do my job, right? If I would treat my fellow colleagues like absolute garbage, like they weren't people, didn't treat them with respect, I would be fired. And these kids walking into such a dangerous environment could be pressed to a bigger issue like a lawsuit for child endangerment or child neglect, which I have no problem filing against this district if this continues to happen, because I'm here for our teachers and our students, none of you, none of them, but for our students and our teachers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Our next speaker is Mr. Gus Philpott.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Gregory. My name is Gus Philpott. I'd like to help you hire the next superintendent. You'll be happy to know it won't be me. Your role is that of executives, not administrators, not managers. At the March 23rd board retreat, you heard an excellent presentation by Attorney Ashley Story on board roles. It was not live streamed, but I read her presentation. She defined the roles clearly. Do you remember? It was only 8.5 weeks ago. A neighbor who has a broad business background shared with me just a month ago the following about defining roles, and I quote, "Without guidelines, people start doing each other's work. That causes a lot of confusion and disruption. For starters, assume that an organization such as the Richland 2 strategic, leadership, supervisory, operational, and execution. Strategic," he wrote, "is the work reserved for the board. It looks far out into the future, establishes policy, and audits the processes. Leadership is the work of the superintendent and his or her administrative staff who implement policy. Supervisory is the work of the school principals. Operational is the work of the department heads leading the day-to-day sessions, and execution is the work of the classroom teachers who deliver the established daily contacts with students. When there is transgression into others' roles, confusion and 9-hour board meetings result. Think of the concept as driving lanes. Stay in, the trip will be much smoother," close quote. My two questions are, do you understand your roles as executives on the Board of Trustees? And how will you ever hire a superintendent if you get so far out of your lane? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. Item 8, voting on executive session items. 8.1, student admission request into adult education program. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we approve the student admission request into the district's adult education program for students numbers 1 through 6.
Is there a second? The motion has been made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Mrs. Nash. Is there any
Correction that I would like for administration to go back to make. Student number 3, the age and the grade does not, well, actually the grade does not match the credits. So if you guys can go back and make that correction. It states 11 credits, but grade 12. And we know that you can't be a senior with 11 credits. So if they can just make that correction, that would be great.
Would you like to make a motion to amend that?
Sure, I can make that motion. I'd like to make a motion for student number 3 to have the grade correct. Well, I guess I should correct. Right, but I guess really before I make a motion, Madam Chair, yes, I would like for someone to correct that because I think one of the colleagues thinking it could have been an error and it should have said 21 credits. So I'm not sure if that was an error or what. So I guess I need someone from administration to tell us what the correct wording should have been. Do we have someone? from student
Mrs.
discipline?
Gregory, do you know?
Okay, thank you.
Can we remove this student, and then we'll come back after a second executive session and vote on this student individually?
Yes.
So can you make that
Madam
motion?
Chair?
Oh, sorry.
I move to approve student admission requests into the district's adult education program for students numbers 1 through 2 and 4 through 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
So the motion has been made to approve students 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 into adult ed. Is there any discussion? The motion was made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Mrs. Nash.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. Moving on to item 8.2, student appeals. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I move that we send student number 1 to Blythewood Academy.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden to send student number 1 to Blythewood Academy. Is there a second?
Second.
And the motion was seconded by Mr. Trapp. Is there any?
Madam Chair,
Dr. Scott.
for student number 1, I have to recuse myself for conflict of interest.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I additionally have to recuse myself. While there's no conflict of interest, I do not want to cause any appearance of impropriety. Any additional discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. Two no, 2 abstentions, the motion carries. Student number 2.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden,
I move that we send student number 2 to Blythewood Academy.
is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded, excuse me, no, the 2 abstentions don't count as a vote. So the majority would be 3 yes, 2 no. Those are the votes that count, only 5. Okay, for student number 2, excuse me. Blythewood Academy, the motion was made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mr. Trapp. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. Is there any discussion? And the vote is 5 yes, 2 no, the motion carries. Student number 3,
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I move that we uphold administration's decision to expel student number 3.
Mrs., is there deny the appeal will be the same motion, to deny the appeal. The appeal,
I would rather it say to uphold
Uphold, okay.
administrator's decision.
Mrs. McFadden's made the motion to uphold administration's decision, and the student will be expelled.
For student number 3.
And it was seconded, forgive me, by Mrs. Washington. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Can we include expulsion for expulsion on that?
Madam Chair,
Oh,
can it
please
stay
repeat, please repeat
I
the,
like it the way it is, please.
board members, please vote. Yes.
Ma'am.
And the vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Student number 4,
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I move that we uphold administration's decision for student number 4.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mrs. And the motion is correct. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Student number 5,
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
administration's decision for student number 5.
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mr. Trapp to uphold administration's decision for student number 5. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes. Is that Mrs. Washington?
yes.
Okay.
I will be recusing myself from this particular student.
Thank you, Mrs. Washington. Any further discussion? To uphold administration's recommendation for student number 5. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 5 yes, carries. Student number 6.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. McFadden?
I move that we uphold administration's decision for student number 6.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mrs. Washington to uphold administration's recommendation for student number 6. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 5 yes, 2 no. The motion carries. Student number 7.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I move that we uphold administration's recommendation for student number 7.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mrs. Nash to uphold administration's recommendation for student number 7. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Student number 8.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. McFadden.
I move that we uphold administration's recommendation for student number 8.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. McFadden and seconded by Mrs. Washington to uphold administration's decision for student number 8. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Washington?
I would like to recommend the board that we review our current discipline policies and our cell phone policies.
Thank you, Mrs. Washington. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Moving on to item 8.3, student permanent expulsion. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move to uphold administration's recommendation to permanently, for student permanent expulsion from Richland 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. McFadden to uphold administration's recommendation for the student for permanent expulsion. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Dr. Scott.
I would just like to say that I'm speaking only for myself. When it comes to students, I'm an advocate for all students, those who do well and those who make mistakes. I think earlier someone talked about the fact that no one's perfect, and with that, I have a problem upholding recommendation for permanently not allowing a student to ever return back to a school unless there is an extreme case, and what I mean by that is murder. They have killed someone in the school, a student, a teacher, faculty and staff member, something of that magnitude. I truly believe that students are bound to make mistakes because we all have as kids. But we say we want to see students succeed. We want them to be our future leaders, but yet we deny them the opportunity to make a mistake and to return back, whether that's to return back in 1 year or to return back in 2 years or even 6 months. But when we start thinking that we are above because we sit at the front table, I always tell people, and especially as I go out and I speak to parents, I speak to students, I speak to colleagues, and I talk about the 5 C's. And one of the 5 C's that I truly like to talk about is the C that stands for circle. And I talk about that because when you believe that you have reached a milestone and you are above other people, you better be careful about that because life is a circle, which means there is no end to the circle. These same people that you feel can't get to the next level and that Richland 2 is so premier and your offense is so great that you cannot return back here, that might be that same student later on in life who's your doctor, your attorney, your neighbor. So just be careful that we say one thing, that we're for students, and then we deny them the opportunity or ever coming back to what we call a premier school district. So as long as I sit in this seat, my actions will mark my talk. They match. They match. And what I mean by that is I will continue to be an advocate for students, regardless of the mistakes that they make, because we all have made mistakes. That's why we're sitting here, so we can redirect you to the path of where you need to go for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Any addition, Mrs. McFadden?
Yes, and I agree with that, Dr. Scott. You know, I went back and forth on that as well. However, this doesn't mean that the student can't ever return to any school. They just can't come back to this district. So there are other opportunities for this person to go to charter schools, home schools, virtual schools. The governor has opened up to where, you know, students can go to different schools with vouchers now. They just can't come back to our schools based on what they did. And if I were a teacher at a particular school and I seen that child come back because, you know, after everything that happened that we're not allowed to divulge out here, I would feel like I would be ready to leave as well. And I sit on the safety committee, and I have to say that the whole, not just the school, but the whole Richland County, parents and all, were disrupted due to this situation. And I do agree, this child is, you know, only got about 2 more years left in school. He can go to another school, get the education, walk across the stage, and even become what you've said. However, for this particular situation, I'm going to have to say that he can't come back to our schools, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mrs. McFadden. Mrs. Porter?
I'd just like to say, as a mother and a former teacher in Richland too, I think about all situations, and sometimes as a parent, I have to make tough decisions, and I make tough decisions out of love. And sometimes you have to lay down the law as a way to say it, and you don't want to say those things, but it's a decision that you have to make. That's a life lesson. And in this child, I hope that this consequence is one that this child will learn from. And again, like Ms. McFadden said, it's not that you can't go to any school, you just can't come to one of our schools. And again, we want to make sure that we send a message, and what we say, we also show in our actions. And this is one of those actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Any other comments? All right, Mrs. Nash.
I just wanted to say, and I understand Dr. Scott's sentiments, I understand Ms. McFadden's sentiments, and Ms. Porter's, and I too feel the same way. I am, you know, one of the things, not just being on safety and security, but, you know, one of the reasons we got elected is because I told people that I was going to make sure that kids were safe and that teachers were safe as much as I possibly could. And I think that there are times when you cannot forsake everybody's learning experience for one person. And that's where we are today. And so that is the reason I will vote the way I'm going to vote. But it is not because I don't care. It is because I do care.
Any other comments? I'm going to take this opportunity. I, again, need to recuse myself while there's no conflict of interest. I do not want to cause any appearance of impropriety. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 5 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention. The motion carries. Item 8.4, employment recommendations and certified releases.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to approve, that we approve the employment recommendations and certified releases.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Dr. Scott to approve the employment recommendations and certified releases. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Washington.
I have to recuse myself from this vote because of a conflict of interest.
Thank you. No more discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 6 yes, 1 abstention. The motion carries. Item 8.5, employment matter, termination of a professional employee. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Washington.
I move that we authorize the board chairperson to execute an order on behalf of the board terminating employment of a professional employee of the district, such order having been reviewed by the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, the motion's been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. Nash. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. 8.6, there is no need. We're moving on to item number 9, unfinished business action requested. 9.1, approval of policy BID. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp.
I move that we approve the revisions to policy BID, board member compensation and expenses.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. Nash to approve policy BID, board member compensation and expenses. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 6 yes, 1 no. The motion carries. Item 9.2, approval, district procurement code. Mrs. Gregory.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. If Ms. LaWanna Robinson-Lee will join us at this time, she is going to share the district procurement code for approval. If you remember, this may sound a little redundant because it came to you earlier because she presented it to you to submit to the state. And so we asked for approval to do that. The state approved it, and it is coming back to you for final approval and adoption. And she will also share with you procurement code exemptions while she's at the podium. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Okay, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Madam Superintendent. As Ms. Gregory has mentioned before, I am bringing the the approved code from the state auditor back to you back in March. This code is the 2021 Model School District Code that was presented by the state of South Carolina, and I'm just ready for you all to adopt it. We got some changes that we need to make, and there cannot be any changes made to this document. It has already been reviewed and approved by the state auditor, so I am just asking if you have any questions in reference to it.
Any questions, board members? Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Nash.
I make a motion that we adopt the approved 2021 Model School District Procurement Code to become effective July 1st, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Mrs. McFadden to adopt the approved Model School District Procurement Code to become effective July 1, 2020. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. 9.3, approval of the district procurement code exemptions.
Okay, thank you all again. As part of our code, Section 710 of our code allows our school board to provide certain exemptions to the procurement code, certain items that we do not have to formally compete. So they are asking that you all approve 27 exemptions to the code.
Board members, any questions? May I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Nash.
I move to approve the exemptions to the 2021 Model School District Procurement Code to become effective July 1st, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Nash and seconded by Mrs. McFadden to approve the exemptions to the 2021 Model School District Procurement Code to become effective July 1, 2023. Is there any discussion? No discussion? Board vote? And the vote is?
I voted yes.
Mrs.
Yes, yes for me. It shows no.
And 7 yes, 0 no, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, 1, approval, budget transfer. Mrs. Gregory.
Dr. Harry Miley is coming to the podium. This budget transfer is based on a recent policy revision, and Dr. Miley will explain that. Thank you, Dr. Miley.
Yes, thank you. 2 or 3 board meetings ago, you adopted a new budget transfer policy, and we have come to a realization that we need to ask your approval. Our IT department had been reviewing their budget and realized that they could take advantage of some purchases of IT equipment that we need. However, we need to make a transfer from the purchase services account, which is a broad category of our budget, to the supply. It's $300,000 to make that change, which is higher than the $250,000. It's not transferring from one department to the other, but he realized, and Tommy Carter knows much more about the IT department than I do, but the district needs the funding and machines. This is to replace some of the Dell desktop computers that are the oldest and need to be replaced in the district, and so that's what this budget request is. It doesn't affect the bottom line of the budget. It just affects the allocation within his department budget.
Board members, questions?
Yes.
Dr. Scott?
Madam Chair, I do have a question. Do you have something that you can provide to us about what the money is going to be used for? For an example, 5 iPads?
Actually, I do. 600 Dell desktop computers.
State level or school?
I think it's to replace, well, as the IT department says, it's to replace our oldest machines that are in the worst shape across the district, I believe. High schools.
So do we have something in writing that says we're going to replace 20 at Ridgeview High School, 80 at Westwood High School, 10 at Northeast? Do we have something that indicates what we're doing and at each high school? Because I'm just trying to figure out, how do we know we need 600 if we don't have any line item to show exactly how the money is being used?
So the 600 is a rounded number, and we're working with high schools right now to identify which 600 in particular are the oldest and most appropriate. We have to go to the school, do a physical inventory, determine if the machines are in use, what they're in use for, so which model would be appropriate to replace which one with what. And that discovery work is going on now. So it'll be 600 total allocated to the high schools to replace the worst that we identify while we're working with the high schools. So For example, we'll work with Westwood High School to say, oh, here's a snapshot of your inventory. Here are sorted by age. They're situated in these computer labs or in these classrooms. And with that list, we'll work with the TLC and with the principal to determine, and that's the detail that we're working on right now. The overall number will be 600, used to its greatest effect across the 5 high schools.
And I guess, and thank you, Tommy, for that information. I guess I'm thinking, how do we know we need 600, or we may need 800, or we may only need 400 if we have not actually gone in and conducted the inventory? So let's say we need 400 once you guys complete this. What are you going to do with the other 200?
Well, we need many, many more than 600. This is, with absolute certainty, we need 600 and many times that. We have approximately 6,500 desktops, around 6,000 laptops district-wide. That's not including Chromebooks. So of that, your rotation on Windows PCs, and to hit that rotation, that life cycle, that means that you replace approximately 20% of that fleet annually. And to achieve that, that would be approximately, it would be 20% of 13,000 machines, so 1,600 machines or so. So we know that on a typical year, we want to replace 1,600 machines. This would be a start, 600 of that 1,600. There's no question that we need 600 machines, and again, many times that. We just don't know particularly right now which 600 we're going to replace. But there certainly are many old computers that they will all be used.
So will we start this for this upcoming school year and to implement?
The timing will depend on product delivery. If, for example, one computer lab can be scheduled to be replaced over the summer, then we will do that. If the principal determines that that's not the best timing for their use case, we might try to time it for once school resumes. But that's part of the data gathering. We'll work with the school to schedule the work to be done.
And my final question is, what school are you going to start with? What was the criteria to start with? Any particular school?
It's not really a serial project. It's more parallel. So we'll collect the data and we'll have all of the data ready at the same time, and then we'll start on all of the 5 high schools at the same time.
Questions?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Trapp.
If I could just ask a question, and this isn't a critical question, I'm just asking for information. Is this a situation where you had some money in one department that you didn't really have to spend, and you're looking to take care of a need in another department, and therefore we're just basically transferring the money?
This is all in his department. There were funds that he needed. The cost of the 600 units was greater than the equipment line item that he had within his budget. Right. But he had about 300,000 of supplies that he could move to that and make this purchase. Okay.
So we're moving stuff around to take care of needs, which is what I would expect a good manager to do. So
exactly.
Okay.
What was the original amount, that the $305,000, when it was originally requested for this $105,000?
We're moving it from purchase service accounts, which might be a variety of things that they might do, software, I assume, or
software licensing, and it's not that we will do without those things. It's that the timing is more advantageous right now to buy hardware. Based on the lead times and based on when product renewals come due, we've realigned most of our contractual obligations. That we pay annually for things like Microsoft licensing, for example, Google licensing, and those things we've tried to realign into the August-September timeframe so that we're not in a rush right at the end of the fiscal year. The fiscal year begins, and because of that, that could be used for hardware, and then we'll spend that same money that we would have spent on things like Google licensing in the fall. So it's
you'll
really
get
it's more timing than it is.
So that money that you're actually, quote unquote, losing from that department, you'll be able to push that back and get that in August when the budget is passed and we start rolling out that money. Okay.
Yeah, we're not losing anything. It's just, it's really moving the money so that we can take advantage of the timing.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. I have one question, final question. So this is an annual practice of what you're saying?
Computer refresh is an annual practice, although the quantities, this is a small portion. This is not a full computer refresh cycle. And we have a Chromebook refresh cycle, and that's generally funded from 8% funds.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carter. Any additional questions?
In fact, what Mr. Carter just mentioned is one purpose of doing this was that we were able to buy this equipment, whereas normally in years past we would have waited until we had an 8% bond issue to use for capital improvements such as computer refresh. So this was an opportunity to use these funds for the equipment refresh without having an 8% bond issue available. And so we would need your approval of this budget transfer if you agree with it.
Thank you, Dr. Miley. Board members, may I have a motion? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Washington,
I move that we approve the budget transfer as presented.
is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Washington and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 11, new business, no action requested. 11.1, an overview of the district procurement card, P-card program. Mrs. Gregory.
Right, Ms. LaWanna Robinson-Lee will come to the podium again to provide the overview of the district P-card program. Thank you.
Good evening again. I'm going to give you all an overview of our district's purchasing card program. We call it short and lovingly our P-cards. Okay, just a brief introduction. So we use our P-cards for small purchases that are less than $2,500. And it's another avenue to spend outside of using a purchase order. So in order to participate in the P-card program, you have to be a district employee. And currently we have 198 cards and 20 new cards issued since the start of the new fiscal year. Our stakeholders that I'm going to introduce you to are, first is the district, and then our card issuer, which is Bank of America. They provide the Visa credit cards for us. Then we have a procurement specialist that is over the P cards, and the card holder who is that's the card, the name of the person who has the card. I'm getting tongue-tied, I'm sorry. And then we have card users, people who are authorized to use the card on behalf of the card holder. And then a proxy reconciler, which is the person that goes into the system, uploads the receipts, add a description, provides an account number, and then of course the merchant who we spend our monies with. A little bit about our P-card. All of our P-cards have a single transaction limit of $2,500, which is our small purchasing threshold limit. All transactions must be reconciled by the 27th of each month. Purchases can be made by the card holder or a card user. And we utilize Bank of America System Works, which it was restructured in 2019, and that's the system that we utilize to, when a charge is made, the proxy reconciler will go in, upload the receipt, provide a description, add their account number in, they will sign off on it, and then it goes over to our procurement specialist that's over the P cards, and she will review them. The P card administration is what our team really does. So with that, we make sure that all the receipts are maintained. We have to maintain our receipts according to our records retention policy. The specialist, again, goes in and audit all of the P-card transactions. In the audit, again, we're looking for itemized receipts. We're looking for anything that could be considered an unauthorized purchase. If there's something that is questionable, she will go in and she will flag that transaction, and then it would ask the proxy reconciler or the cardholders to provide a response to correct that flag. If that transaction is in fact an unauthorized transaction, we will issue a P-card violation to the cardholder. Reasons to suspend or revoke the P-card: failure to adhere to our district policies and procedures, failure to safeguard the P-card, use of the P-card for personal purchases, failure to keep on all of your necessary documentation, failure to reconcile or sign off on the card by the 27th of the month, or any type of shipment or unauthorized purchases where we ship things to our homes. The consequences include surrendering the P-card, reimbursing the district via check, cash, or payroll deduction, prosecution, and/or termination. And we have offenses to this, first, second, and third offense. We will be updating the P-card manual based on some recommendations from our external auditor. So we will be working on that to implement that on July 1. As far as training, when a new cardholder is requested, we will give them a copy of the P-card policy. We will sit down and have one-on-one training with the new cardholder to let them know what's expected of the card. They're responsible for the card, even if they let someone else utilize their card. Our team provides biannual training to our end users, our bookkeeper, and we also conduct something that I call a pulse check. So the second Thursday of every month, we meet with our bookkeepers and I check their pulse, make sure they're okay. We don't have any questions, they don't have any issues. If they do, we'll hammer everything out for them, get the questions answered. Then we also provide any additional trainings as needed. And with the adoption of our new code, our exemptions, and we're going to be implementing a procedure, purchasing procedures, we will be doing heavy training in June and July of our new code, our purchasing procedures manual, and we will be touching everyone who will be assigned a P-card, who has a P-card, who is authorized to spend taxpayer dollars. Everybody will be touched. This is a follow-up to the Inspector General. We submitted those responses to him on March 2nd for the transactions that he had in question. And I have here our district response and our actions. Of the 4 transactions, 1 was actually unauthorized, and we said that we will monitor such actions accordingly in the future. Since the start of the fiscal year, we've had some violations, and these violations included upgraded airline tickets, personal purchases, split purchases, ride shares, and shipping items to home addresses. Questions?
Dr. Scott?
Ms. Robinson-Lee, thank you so much for that detailed report. It was much needed. We were overdue. So I do appreciate you and your team getting the information back to us in a manner in which we can visually see and understand. I guess my question would be, not so much a question, but a concern with that. You mentioned 198 P cards and 20 new cards. So is that 198 plus 20, or is that 198 including the 20?
That's 198 including the 20.
Okay. And I know you mentioned that you guys wanted some suggestions. So one, I would like to suggest that P cards return back to only district office key leaders like they had in the past, as well as principals only. So the district office key leaders, and that's something that you would get with, administration and talk about that, and our principals at the building level, and then the other key leaders that you guys see fit, like executive staff and people like that. I truly believe that 198 P cards are just way too many. And I can recall, working in the district for quite some time, that we would never had this many P cards just out floating around and people having the opportunity to spend as they choose. And not everyone, because the majority are doing the right thing. But just looking at the IG report, and not only looking at the IG report, just now, my experience is going on now every month, just looking at the monthly reports, still some red flags there. So I do want you guys to truly monitor the P cards and then come up with a plan moving forward that only key leaders and building level principals are using P cards. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mrs. Washington?
Thank you again so much for those updates. I do have a couple of questions. So when I look at the P card policy issued by the state, the South Carolina Purchasing Card Policy and Procedures, we're following these policies, or?
No, ma'am. So our IG came back and said that our P card manual is 75% compliance to the state P card policy.
Okay. So then my other question is, so then that changes one of my questions. In terms of purchases, because I look at the transactions as well, is it easier to just post the actual bank statements? I've seen some districts do that versus having to create like a spreadsheet and tabulate all of this.
Well, so our team doesn't handle the transparency report, so I would defer to Dr. Miley and Ms. Williams on uploading the statements, but I assume that we take that transparency report from an upload that we do into from Bank of America into our ERP system. Okay. So that could be an option.
Okay, and then my other question is, so I'm looking at like a purchase of, you said $2,500. Back in January, there was an AT&T bill payment of $19,000.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Okay, so we have the single transaction limit is standard across all of our cards. So in the event that we need to pay a bill or a transaction that's going to exceed that $2,500, there's a P card is a deviation form where we're deviating essentially from that $2,500. So when they do that, they have to fill it out. They have to tell us why they need that single transaction limit increase. We will go in and increase that single transaction limit. The system allows us to set a date for that transaction limit to go from, say, the $15,000 or $20,000 back down to the $2,500 after the payment has been posted.
Okay.
So we don't leave any cards lingering out there with a $2,500 or more single transaction limit.
Okay, and then tell me the policy for doing things like food purchases and things of that nature, and entertainment. How does that fit into this? Because if you look at a lot of these transactions, you see Amazon, well, $16.18. That could be anything. You see the Cheesecake Factory in Tampa, Florida. You see Hooters, you see, so a lot of this stuff is it's just telling us exactly what these things, the food purchases and the entertainment. There was something in here where there were tickets purchased for the Charlotte Hornets. There were 3 different transactions. When I was in schools, we put those on purchase orders because we contacted the NBA and we put it on a purchase order. So I guess I'm a little confused as to what all in terms of food and entertainment should be on these P cards.
So we are in the process of working on some procedures. Currently, we really don't have any procedures as it relates to food policy and entertainment. So as part of our manual update, that's what we are doing in our finance procedures update.
And what were some of the recommendations from the auditor? You mentioned that earlier.
He didn't question anything so much for food, but purchasing really from Amazon, items that are on the state contract, we should not utilize anything outside of the state contract. There was a recommendation that, let me go get my, I didn't mean to point at you, let me get my.
Oh, no, you're fine, I get it.
Oh, yes, so Dr. Miley put the audit report in front of you.
And you said the district is currently working on updating the P card policy?
Yes, ma'am.
And
updating the P card policy and establishing a purchasing procedures manual.
When do we expect to have that updated? I know your team is working.
We plan to have that effective July 1.
Thank you.
To coincide with the code. So some of the findings that our auditor did come back to us in relation to the P card, he said that he found multiple procurement card transactions for educational supplies that could have been purchased through state and district contracts, but was not. It was purchased through an alternative supplier, which we know who that was. since I've been here, I've kind of been trying to discourage the use of Amazon.
Stop using it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And to kind of gear us back to utilizing state contract, because our finance procedure manual tells us that we need to utilize state and district contracts. So we're gearing back, and I will gladly state that our spend with Amazon has severely declined, so much so that they called me.
Good. Thank you very much. I look forward to those policy updates, and thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Mrs. Porter.
So I have a question about Amazon. So this is a hypothetical situation. So say there is a particular keyboard that one wants to use, and they look at an authorized user that is recommended, and the cost of that keyboard is 3 times the amount through the preferred or recommended seller, and they look on Amazon and it's much cheaper. I learned that Amazon does do purchase orders if you have a business user's account. But there have been, say that there have been staff members that have been asked to not use it because maybe they were not going about it through purchase orders. Would it not be okay if they did it the right way through using a purchase order, if it would save money?
So the issue is not utilizing a purchase order, because we use purchase orders on Amazon. We use a purchase order and we use the P card for Amazon.
Okay.
So the issue is that in our finance manual, we say that if a purchase needs to be made, we need to utilize the state contract first. So I've had questions in our trainings about well, Amazon has something cheaper. So I recommend that when they have a purchase like that, that they obtain 3 quotes. Even if it's for $50, they obtain those 3 quotes, and if Amazon is cheaper, and those other 2 quotes, maybe one is from a state contract and another one is from an outside vendor, that they upload those 3 quotes to the requisition or upload them to the P-card transaction. So in the event that transaction is pulled for audit, the auditor could go in and see, oh, okay, well, they bought Amazon, but the state contract was 55, Amazon was 10. If he flags us for that, shame on him.
Mrs. Nash, did you have a question?
I did. It was actually about the P cards. Less is more in this situation. But also, if you guys were to upload like the bank statements, because I did find that easier to read. It felt more transparent when I did see it on other districts' websites. Would it show more like what the Amazon purchase is, or is it going to be exactly the same, but it's just
like your bank statement.
Okay.
It's going to show Amazon, the transaction ID, the amount.
Okay.
And at the top of it, say who the card holder was. That would be the only thing that would be on there.
Well, thank you, Ms. Robinson-Lee. It's good to see you.
Mrs. McFadden?
Yes, for number 2, it said the school district did not present the minority business enterprise utilization to the board on an annual basis. What is that?
The minority business report. So we have to report, according to our code, twice a year, our minority participation. So that's any type of minority firm.
So would that be our contractors that
Yes,
are
ma'am.
building?
That would be our contractors. That would be anybody that we buy something from. Those would be that's our minority reporting. So we report on our certified minorities, which are certified by the state of South Carolina, and we also report on minorities that indicate on their vendor application that they are a minority.
Okay. Is that the ones that we hire or the ones that show interest?
Higher. That's the ones we spend. We have to report to you all who we actually spent money with.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Trapp?
Just a couple of questions. The cards, are they issued to individual employees? In other words, each of those has an employee that they're issued to?
Yes, sir. Each card is issued to an employee. We do have an audit finding in here. I have multiple cards and department names. I responded back to him to say each card in an individual's name by July 1.
Okay. Are those individuals authorized to share those cards with other people, or is that something that's discouraged? I mean, never.
Those are the card holder.
Okay.
can allow someone else to use their
Okay.
card. But if we refer back to what the state policy says, the state says, no, we should not do that.
Okay.
But school districts are a little bit different, and we can kind of deviate from that. So a card holder can let a card user who is a district employee utilize their card.
Okay. Can they physically take the card with them and it not be in the
They may have physical
outside of the
possession of
card?
the card,
holder?
yes, sir.
Okay. Are these cards loaded with a certain amount of, or do they not have a credit limit?
Cards have a credit limit of $5,000.
Okay.
Some have credit limits of 10, but part of our P-card update, we will establish a guideline where it's standardization on levels for credit limits.
Okay. So it has a maximum purchase of $2,500, and then the credit on, or the limit on each card each month varies, it sounds like, depending on what the card is, who the card is issued to.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So with the transaction limit, so our single transaction limit is $2,500, right? So they can only go in the store and they cannot spend more than $2,500. If they do, it gets declined. But they can leave out of Walmart and spend $2,500 and then go over to Target and spend $2,500. But once they get to $10,000, they can't spend.
Right, okay. Okay, I make a lot of that was the case. Okay, thanks.
What is the line item that all these are paid from? Because if you're saying 198 P cards at $5,000 each, and everybody wants to do a spending spree one day, how is that handled? Help me understand how that's handled.
So they would spend according to their budget, so the responsibility will be ultimately up to the cardholder to spend what they have allocated in their budget. So as for us, we cannot monitor their budgets and say, hey, you don't have anything in your 410, you shouldn't have made this purchase. Procurement cannot do that. So it will be up to the individual.
So you're saying there's 198 different budgets that someone can spend from?
No, ma'am, I'm telling you, we have 8 purchasing cards. We have 198 cards. Athletic directors, and they all have their budgets within their school, and they're allowed to spend out of their budget utilizing the P card.
So that's that $300,000 that's allocated to, say, a high school that they get. Of that $300,000, those P cards are divided up, say, 10 to Westwood High. I'm just using them as an example, just as a high school. Let's just say high school X. So they got 10 cards. They have a $300,000 budget. Coach has $5,000. Math teacher has $2,000. So within that budget, if all of them are spending, there's a limit on each of those cards that equals that amount of $300,000.
The cards would not equal to $300,000. The cards will only equal the monthly limit. So whatever the budget is, if that coach has $5,000 and he can spend $5,000 on his credit card.
Right, but everyone at that school, all their cards should equal up to $300,000. It can't be, you said there's a limit on each card.
Right, we have a credit limit. Just like a regular credit card, you have a credit limit. Once you get to that credit limit, you can't spend anymore.
Right. So it would have to be, if they have a budget of $300,000 for that school, then each card can't be more than $300,000.
The card wouldn't be more than $300,000.
No, I'm saying not individual card, all the cards collectively together. All 10 cards, on each of those cards, they can't add up to be more than $300,000.
Okay, so from procurement, we cannot monitor the budget. So if they go and swipe and swipe and swipe and swipe and swipe, sign off at the end of the month through our suite, it's going to be at $300,000. They're over $300,000 according to our system that we utilize, which is Works.
Okay.
You good?
Dr. Scott,
did you?
Okay. I just want to go back to something that Mrs. McFadden mentioned earlier, and it just made me think of something. She talked about the minority business that we have, and I do recall at one point we said that we would do, I think, 12% with minority business. Is that correct?
The goal is 10.
The goal is
Yes,
10.
ma'am.
And I know we had a conversation about each year increasing that goal. So have you guys had that conversation? Because when I think about the makeup of the district, 12%, 10% is really low. And I know that many school districts still have minority businesses.
Okay, so the increase in the minority participation is new to me. Okay, so I have not heard that we should be increasing it, but I think we should first try to meet the 10% because we have not met the 10%. And we can certainly look at increasing it, but I think, and don't hold me 100% to this, I think another school district was not reprimanded, but was brought to attention that they stated a goal of I think theirs was 15%, which was against the law. So they had to go back and refer back to the state because we're under the state code of 10%. So we can have an internal procedure of trying to exceed that, but we cannot state that we want to do 12%, 15%, or anything. It has to be the 10% by law.
Thank you for saying that, because in all departments, we need to figure out how to partner with minority businesses so we can get to at least 10%. Because that's still a low number. So I'd like to see you guys work together and bring back some strategies to us on how you're going to try to meet that goal. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're all
Ms.
set.
Robinson.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson-Lee.
Thank you for coming back. Great job.
Item 11.2, the first reading of the 2023-2024 budget. Mrs. Gregory.
Yes, we have Dr. Miley, who is our Senior Chief for Finance and Operations, and Ms. Nancy Williams, our Chief. They will share the first reading of the 2023-24 budget.
We have a couple of things that we want to go over first before we get into the budget itself. On your desk tonight, I've placed several items that were just easier to print out in hard copy for your review. And those before we get into the budget. One is you do have the procurement report from the auditor as a hard copy with his findings and our responses to those findings. Second, we have a little problem with the state government. The state budget is in impasse. The Senate and House conferees are not meeting. And we're concerned that, just like last year, the state budget may not be passed by June 30. If you remember, those of you who were here last year, we were concerned, and in fact it happened, so we asked the board to pass a continuing resolution so that if the state does not adopt or operate after July 1, if they do, if you adopt this, we're asking you to adopt, we're going to put it on, hopefully be on the agenda for June 13th board meeting. If we adopt that continuing resolution and the board does act and we do have a state budget, the continuing resolution dissolves. It doesn't have any impact. So we think of it just in case something does delay the state budget from getting passed, we can still pay bills and pay our employees after July 1 with the continuing resolution. And I have a copy on your desk of that draft of that continuing resolution, which is identical to last year's except the dates, the fiscal years are changed. So I just wanted to let you see, so you can review that. We hope to have that on the agenda for June 13. And again, it's kind of a just in case. It has no impact if the state government, if state legislature passes. Your desk is, you've asked me, and I think I've handed this before, but we have the dates of the county council budget process and their timeline. And the county council has had their first reading about a month ago. The county council has 3 readings, and like many government organizations that have 3 readings, their first reading is in title only. It's literally 4 words, and that's the whole budget. They did the first reading about a month ago. Their second reading is this Thursday afternoon, about 6 o'clock this Thursday, the 25th. We have submitted, they wanted our request for local funding, which is a portion of our budget. Once we get to the budget, you'll see it's the local tax collections that the county collects for us. And they also consider the state allocation for property tax reimbursement, which is actually our county council considers that a local dollar. And so they approve those two combined. And you'll see it's about $180 million from the county that they approve. That would be with a 0 mill increase. So that's roughly $120 million in local taxes and about $60 million in property tax reimbursement from Act 388 and other previous laws. So just FYI, we'll be there. We don't have any plans to make any statement unless asked, but we will be there at 6 o'clock on May 25th. And the last thing is a budget timeline. We've updated the website with this timeline, and we've moved the second reading for our budget for you to approve to June 27, because we are still concerned, so we would like a little extra time. Hopefully by the 27th of June, we'll have the state resolved. We'll bring this budget back to you because there could be some changes at the state level that would affect our budget, and bring that to you back to you for second reading on June 27. It has to be adopted by June 30. That we think that's adequate time, and hopefully the state will adopt their budget. So given that, those are kind of just a few random facts that I need you to be aware of. The budget that is online that we sent to you and loaded up to board docs last Thursday is almost identical to the hard copy one I handed out tonight. I think it was Thursday about 4:30 or 5 o'clock when we sent that to Georgette to post on board docs. We'd been working on it very hard for about a week or two to put that budget together. We took recommendations from the board, we took recommendations from departments, and we put that budget together as we saw it last Thursday, the 17th. While we were at the Serve and Connect meeting over with the sheriff at Peterson Church, we got an email from the county auditor who had increased our dollar amount from local revenues. And so in order to meet the budget that afternoon, we included a $5 million increase to balance the budget. A $5 million increase would be the first increase in taxes that we've had in operating we've had 4 years of no tax increases for operating millage, and so that would be the first one in 5 years. It was $5 million, which would be about, if you owned a $20,000 car, it would be about 50 cents a month. But it is a tax increase, and I know that's a bad word. And so, but we felt like the budget was a sound budget that hit a lot of the areas that we felt like were in great need of the district. It followed a lot of the state mandates. I believe that the state mandates they're at the top of the budget, and I think they equal about $15 million of state funding. So, of state requirements. The state doesn't always fund completely the mandates that they passed. However, after getting the auditor's update on Thursday, we sat back down and revised the budget, and the budget that we need you to consider, in essence, we have two in front of you that you need to consider, one with a mill increase, but in fact, we think that we can deliver the budget without a mill increase, and we think that's very important. So with that, the items on the budget that include the individual categories and the changes in the budget that we're recommending, that's kind of the most interesting one and the one that people like to see the most. Harry has a bad habit of not putting page numbers on documents. And so it's like it's the last page on the handout that I gave you. That is basically the exact same budget that we put together in terms of the items that we're recommending to change in our budget that you had on Thursday in the board docs. And we can apologize for that confusion, but we had no time to change that before the board docs had to be posted. So the budget is a rather aggressive one. We have about $26 million, almost $27 million of new funding for the district. That's the largest amount of new funds in a single year that since I've been here, almost maybe $7 or $8 million more than any single year. We have included, and you can read it, but some of the highlights are we included a $2,500 increase in teacher pay. The state mandate is for a $2,500 increase to the state minimum salary schedule. We at first thought about doing $2,000, but after some serious research, from Nancy Williams, we realized that if we only gave a $2,000 increase to our teachers, we would drop from about first, second, or third in the Midlands to I think 7th or 8th if we only gave $2,000 increase. So we went back to the drawing board, shared it with Superintendent Gregory, And everybody felt like, well, one, we know that teachers deserve more than that, but certainly if we can at least stay competitive in the Midlands, then we ought to try to do that. So this budget includes an increase in the minimums of our salary schedule. Every cell in the schedule would be raised by $2,500, plus, of course, the step increase that they would also be getting on a normal basis. So again, that's not enough, but we feel like it's the best that we can do given this budget and other increases that we have in here. We've got other increases for non-certified staff. We've got the required requirements for state health insurance, several $1 million, 1% increase in retirement for employer contributions was about almost $2 million. So we have those requirements, but we also increased, we've got several operational and contract issues that are impacting our budget. The SRO contract, as you all know, we have about 37 SROs in the district. 14 of them are paid for 100% by the State Department of Public Safety. Those are grants that we got. This is about the third year. The first year or so, they were about out of the State Department of Education, and after that, it was moved over to the State Department of Public Safety, and they pay for 14 SROs, equipment, training, everything, and which is wonderful. And we've applied for 6 more. It's a grant program out of the Department of Public Safety. We've applied for 6 more. We hope we haven't heard yet of whether they will be funded. We do know that the state increased the allocation to the SRO program at the state level, so we're hoping that that will trickle down and help us fund additional SROs in our for Richland too. But Richland County Sheriff's Department called me about a month ago and said that there were 2 things that were going to impact our current contract for our 23 SROs that we pay for out of the budget that you approve. It's currently about a $1.3 million budget contract that we have with the Sheriff's Department. And the Sheriff's Department is obviously a part of Richland County. And Richland County has decided 2 things that impact us a lot in our costs. One is they plan to give, I think, about a 4% raise to all employees July 1. And then they're planning to give another raise, at least that amount, in January 1, which is all good. I mean, they all deserve the raises, but that results in an 8% increase to us for our budget for our SRO contracts with the Sheriff's Department. The county also decided to go to an equipment leasing program, vehicle leasing program. I think I might have mentioned this in our workshop. The leasing program, given that we have 37 vehicles, the county is moving away from owning those vehicles to leasing them. And so we don't know the exact number, but so far we've been told it could be as much as $250,000 a year for our payment for the lease portion of our SROs. Bottom line, the SRO contract, the MOU the Sheriff's Office has sent us over is an increase of $600,000 to our operating budget. That's a substantial, almost a 50% increase. Well-deserved. That they plan to give to all county employees is going to, in fact, impact us there. A couple of other items. I can read them to you. You've got them. But remember that this reflects a 0 mil increase and a $2,500 increase to the teacher salary schedule. I know you haven't had the revised document very long, but you've had the board docs version since Thursday. I was wondering if you had any questions. We feel very confident that we've put together a comprehensive budget addressing security personnel, raising them up to $15 an hour, maintenance personnel, raising them up to $15 an hour, teachers' instructional aides, raising them up to a minimum starting salary of $15 an hour. We've included a position for an internal auditor, as the IG had recommended. We're including several HR FTEs, as the IG had recommended, and one of them was for a time and attendance program. But we consider those as compliance issues in terms of the district complying with various mandates. A couple of things that we had committed to before is a $2 million line item for the staffing of the metal detectors. So we made that commitment. There's another commitment for hiring bonuses that we made a month or so ago, and that line item is in here. I believe it's line item 8. So we have those, that's $4 million of previous commitments that we made, all well needed, but they have impacted this budget in terms of the cost, the total bottom line. I'm sure, Nancy, I've missed a few things that are important, but I'll be happy to answer any questions or go through this line item by line item. I just defer to you.
Board members' questions. Dr. Scott?
Dr. Molly, thank you for this report. Just a couple questions. When I looked at line item number 19, I know you mentioned $15, and I know at one point we said 20. So did you guys just look at the budget and realize that $20 for these employees just wouldn't fit in the budget?
Partially, yes, ma'am. Because we also had, it was difficult to raise the security to 20 and not raise the instructional aides. And it was hard to not raise the instructional aides without raising the maintenance and custodial. So they all deserve $20, but in order to fit it in the budget, and one of the things I think I would like to stress is that the demands on the district for the increases in salaries, whether it's teachers, teacher aides, security, is not we don't fix it with this budget.
Right.
You'll be here next year doing the same thing, chasing other districts in the region and private sector demands. And so it is an ongoing issue with any budget, especially the size of ours with this 4,000 employees. So one is we have tried to tackle those things where we know it's a long-term race with increments. And so my recommendation is if we can fund the $15 this year, we leave it on the list for next year, and that, okay, this isn't an end game. We've got to do this. We'll be chasing this forever. Teacher salaries are the same thing, and the state has I believe, I don't know, has it adopted a? The state's said that we're going to raise our teacher salary, starting salary, to $50,000 in 4 years. In 4 years. So our budget will see this impact, which is, I mean, again, it's great. Some of the recommendation is that we keep those people, those positions in mind, and that we increase them as incrementally the best we can, because they're all important to the delivery of our education services. But I hope that helps.
It did. And for item number 21, staffing for Performance Arts Center, is that for multiple employees or just one director position, or what is that for?
Thank you for asking. Last year, our concern, without boring you, but our concern was when we built this building, we had this great plan for the conference center. But we didn't know really, we do now, but we really didn't know how to do it at conference center. We really weren't in the business. I mean, we've learned, and I think we do a great job. What we wanted to make sure is when we build the Performing Arts Center, let's make sure we have the staffing, the plan, well in advance of the doors opening. And so last year, you approved the same, basically, for the half the year from July 1 to, from just January 1, 23 to June 30, 23. That funded those two positions. We have not hired them yet, but that's what it was. And this is the second half of the funding required to make them full-time FTEs and have the funding in the budget for them for going forward.
And thank you for that clarification for the new board members as well as for the public that's watching. So if you can tell us exactly what's going to be those two positions so they understand the funding with that.
Actually, that's way out of my lane, but I probably can help a little bit with Will Anderson, if he would help me. We need a director of that facility. We need a coordinator probably for programs. I think we have a lot of decisions to be made for the about who gets to use it. Are they going to be, is it frictions? But we wanted to try to get these people on board to address those questions well before we open, but Will may be able to answer those better than I can.
Yeah, it's a director and then an assistant to assist with that. So as y'all know, we've had the district auditorium for many years, and we've had all these events, and we know that people want to register for events years in advance. And so we want to have those positions in place to start the programming, get the facility up and running. So on day one, it's already booked up. So those were those positions. Yes, ma'am.
So these positions will start July 1, 2023?
The plan is to get them hired as soon as possible. We could have hired them January because it was a half position. They have not been hired as of yet. Our opening date for the performing arts, late spring, early summer. And so we're still 11 months before the center opens to make sure the programming and planning and all that's in place. Yes, ma'am.
Right, and that's why I want to ask that, because I know we had approved for this person to start in January, and we're in May, and now we're approving the second half, and we haven't even put the person in place for the first half. So I guess later with you all, you guys need to make a decision as to when we're going to put these people in place so they can come and share with us what's the future goal moving forward. And then finally, Dr. Miley, we talked about the advancement for school board increasing from 7,000 to 10,000. I did not see that in the line, as well as the amount that we currently have in our budget presented to us.
It is not in here. We can add it. The increase from 7,000 for individual travel to 10,000 would be what? 7 times 3 would be $21,000. That we could certainly increase. We could add that as a line item, and that would be. It would not require. I mean, it's close. I don't think we would need to raise millage to cover that.
Right.
And the full budget for the board. We didn't address that because except for this year, with the exceptional legal fees, the board's budget has been in pretty good shape for some time.
Absolutely.
And so the travel would be one that we certainly could include, and it's not, we can add into this budget.
And just the last thing, not only did we talk about that, we talked about the committees that we have in place, being able to have that subcommittee budget as well. And I did not see that in the line item. And I just don't want us to move forward with approving items and then we realize something is missing. That's why I made sure that I went through each line item to make sure those things were included that we discussed previously.
We will, and that's a good question, we will go back through the board's budget looking at several previous years. I think there would be adequate funds in the board's budget to allocate some funds for committees. Not this year. Again, this was an outlier. I would think this year with the legal fees we've had is unique, and that we won't have.
Mrs. McFadden.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Miley, for having this printed out for us. I appreciate it. So going back to line item number 19, how many does that cover? So I know that their base is covered in the salary, but this is supposed to be an increase. That $177,000, that's an increase.
The $177,000 is the cost to allocate, to give those raises.
Okay, yes, sir. So how many persons does that cover?
60.
It's an increase to everyone's salary schedule. So it starts at whatever it is now at $12 or $13 an hour. So it starts at 15, but every bucket gets changed. So all the employees now reflect their increase reflects the new salary schedule. So it's all of our employees that are either full-time or part-time based on their schedule they make. And we have roughly 60-something employees that are currently on staff. We have 30-something full-time officers, and then the rest are part-time security officers.
So for the 30 that are full-time, and my interest is their annual salary. Say they've been here for 5 years, and they're at 15 already. Are they going to be able to make it to $30,000 annual? I mean, that's my concern. If we have a full that are not making above poverty, and they are safe, what's their annual salary going to be for our full-time safety and security officers?
Yeah,
that's kind of what I would like to know.
Do the math. I don't know off the top of my head, but we can do the math on that. So.
So that's 30,
I mean, it's 30, I mean, you can do the math now if you want, or I can get the answer to you.
so that's $21,000.
Is it possible, Mrs. McFadden, that they could give it to us in like a weekly
Well,
update
I
or?
just got it, it took me 2 seconds. That's $21,000. My concern is that we have full-time, 40 hours a week, safety and security officers, not even, and that's just rough numbers, that's before taxes. They're not bringing home $19,000. Concern. And that is, if they're just making 15, and somebody who's brand new coming in, they're making $21,000 before anything's taken out.
And we can run those numbers for you.
Yes, sir.
Again, back to my response to Dr. Scott, what's that?
I got more than 21, but it's okay. I got 31,200.
Okay, well, let's get it right then, because I got $30.
Let us do, but one of my concerns again is there could be quite a few employees in lots of job categories that would not be at 31,000. So again, like the $20 an hour, that if we do it for one group, it puts a lot of pressure on other groups. So again, I think it is an incremental goal. You do what you can each year. You are limited with standard living wage, but we can certainly run those numbers for you. What we have is actually, we call it a scattergram, but we actually know how many employees are step 4 with this level of grade education. So we know exactly that, in fact, there weren't that many at the first 2 or 3 steps. They were, more senior than that. But again, we can certainly generate those numbers for you and look at the cost.
Okay, because I have concerns, because earlier in the year, I asked for salaries for district office principals, upper level workers, and the pay is very interesting, and the scale is very interesting, considering the amount of work that our security officers may have to do. And I've looked at, even at Richland County, and some of them making. And I think that, I've said it a couple of times before, I think everyone should get paid what they're worth. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't. However, we're talking about our security officers, and they're worth more than $19,000. I'm not saying teachers' aides or anybody else isn't. And I'm thinking that if we're a premier district, we need to pay our employees at least minimum, at least where it's a living wage. It's not a living wage if we have employees that we pay for in our district that have to go get EBT. There's nothing wrong with it, but if we're this premier district, then none of our employees should have to stand in a line to get assistance, and that's my concern. And I know you guys are working hard. It is where some of these positions are shaken out, that we need to realign them to reflect everybody making a living wage, so that everybody can be comfortable, not just some people.
Well, we can run that analysis and get it to you well before second reading.
Board members, any other, Mrs. Washington?
The last time, or maybe it was a couple of meetings ago, you provided us with some recommendations that district office personnel and leaders had, and some of them did include, there were some new positions. Is that included in?
Some are. We don't shoot the messenger. I don't make policy decisions. Mean people. Mm-hmm. And we have vacancies.
Right.
And we really need more employees, but to build them in the budget and still have vacancies where we can't fill them and allocate those budget funds, let's focus on increasing, again, like we think this reflects. It may not be enough, but we think this reflects that attention to employees that we have, increasing as much as we can to retain them, and without increasing their, as you see in that of $27 million, we have 5 FTEs. So that's relatively low for this district to add, especially when we continue to grow with enrollment, but not employees. So that was our focus. But yes, we consider those. We had them all having requests. We sent it back to them and said, okay, give us your top 2, give us your top 3. And of course, they sent back their top 7, but, still, they whittled it down some, and we still took those into consideration, but with our focus on retention and increasing the salaries of our existing employees the best we can.
I appreciate that.
I just wanted to add to that, if I may, Ms. Washington, just holistically, this budget is pretty much, if you talk about percentages, 75% is made basically of salary and benefits to support staff within the district. Roughly 10% relates to safety initiatives, be it the SRO contract or the contract for the metal detectors, and then roughly 14% relates to our current contractual obligations, whether it's an increase in the cost of general liability or property insurance and things of that nature. Dr. Miley mentioned adding the new positions. There was a serious attempt, but what we ended up doing was looking at those positions that met a true compliance requirement. Yes. That's where it started. And as we went down that list, the money ran out.
Absolutely. I do have one more question. Thank you so much for that. My other question is, HR presented a bonus structure. Is that included in here? Not for the sign-in bonuses, but
it was the longevity bonuses. Yes, ma'am.
It is included?
No, it's not. The longevity bonus, if I remember right, was gazillions of dollars. And we decided that we had the signing bonus, we had the increase in for the $2,500, and we will address the longevity. It's just a tremendous cost if it is a substantive bonus, longevity bonus. It is a substantial amount of money. I mean, in the $10 to $15 million, if I remember right.
So we will, again, in the spring, have to look at what we did this year.
I think perhaps the approach might be, let's say we had $1,000, then let's start at $300, something incremental to show that the district cares about retaining and longevity, but again, it doesn't require a budget buster and or a tax increase. Again, there are our Act 388 tax mill cap this year is 33 mills. We could generate a whole lot of money, but I don't think it would be well received by our taxpayers or you or the county council. But the tax increase, we have been told a lot of the other Midlands districts are requesting a tax increase, substantial, 5, 8, 15 mills. Again, we felt like it was important to try to get this to you with a 0 mill increase. So.
Mrs. Porter.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out a few things. One, I want to thank you for the 6% raise for staff members. Last year it was 2%. I feel like the over 6% was a nice jump, and I think our teachers and staff will appreciate that. So thank you for that. I was really happy to see that. I know we didn't get the longevity bonus, but we did get our retention bonus and that 6% raise, and that was definitely something that we can appreciate. Also, I wanted to point out for the public that we have the paid parental leave costs, which you itemized here as being $345,000 estimated, and that's not paid by the state, and that's something that you have in our budget as well. Including that, and that's something to consider as well. That's part of our budget. I also wanted to thank you for the raise for our TAs and our security staff. That $15 is above industry standard, and I'm appreciative of that. And I think we are moving in the right direction. So anything above industry standard is in the positive direction. So I appreciate that. I also wanted to ask about what it would look like for an average sized business owner with your question, with your proposed budget of the 5 mil increase. Should we consider that, if that was an option, what that would look like for an average sized business owner?
It was about $3 a month for every $100,000 value of the business. So if you had a business, not your income, but the value of the business, the asset, the taxable value, would be about $3 a month per 100,000. So you do the math. A larger company would pay more, but we felt like the $5 million increase was a bad word, but at $5 million, it really wasn't a huge impact. Now, on a $20,000 car, I'd mentioned 50 cents a month. Obviously, people have $100,000 cars, and they would have to pay a lot more. But the average, some of you weren't here during the referendum, but we got it from the assessor's office. We got the average value of a vehicle in Richland 2 when 2018 was $8,500. So that lots of people have cars more than that, and lots of people have more valuable cars. But we felt like for a $20,000 car might be a pretty good estimate of the average car, and that would be about 50 cents a month. And a business owner would be roughly $3 a month, assuming it was a $100,000 value.
Thank you so much.
And while you thank me, we just crunched the numbers. The senior people in the room that know what they're doing, they're the ones who help direct us in terms of making the priorities and setting the priorities for these things. We just crunch the numbers and try to make it work.
Thank you all. It's a lot of numbers. Thank you all.
Any other questions? Mr. Trapp?
Yeah, two questions, and this is just something so I can kind of figure out what we're looking at here. Do we have any employees that have been funded by grants, their salaries were funded by grants, or do we have many employees like that?
We have, we try not to have many at all, because we have in the past experienced the problem when the grant runs out, the employee who's a great employee, friendly with everybody, loves them, and they've got to leave. And that the district has at times just said, oh, we'll come on in, we'll pay you out of general fund. And that can happen, but that's difficult for the finance officer to make that happen all the time. So we look at those grants very carefully. Now we do have some health aides, I believe. I don't think Dawn is here, but I think we have a few health-related nurse aides in our third last pot of ESSER funds. I think we may have some assistance in our ESSER funds that will be expiring August 24. So we will address those in the next budget and or figure out another funding mechanism. But yes, we're very careful about that because we have been bitten in the past with that experience of no commitments. You know, they don't. It's one thing if you tell an employee you're on a 3-year grant and when it's out, bye-bye. But when that isn't explained, and even when you tell them that, it's difficult because they have been a contributing member to our staff. They do a great job, and the funding is gone. So we tried to do it on the front end of. In fact, one of our processes is this grant looks great. Are there any FTEs created? And if they say no, we go, it sounds good to me. But when they say yes, we drill down a little bit more.
Okay, so generally they're no longer employed with the grant money. Okay, the other thing is whenever, now I'm assuming, I know teachers fall into this, I don't know if other employees do, but we have obviously salary, we have sick days, and I think some people have personal leave days, so many a year. Are those, when we talk about a salary, I'm assuming that is the literal paycheck a person receives as well as personal days and sick days are calculated into the total cost of the employee?
I don't pretend to be an HR expert, but when we say salary, that's the actual salary. And then in addition to that, they have the leaves offered to that employee. But that does not technically affect their salary, I don't think.
But that, I guess my question is, when we're figuring the budget, do we budget for those benefits, I guess I'll call them?
The only benefits we budget for are the health insurance premiums that we have to pay and retirement premiums and those types of, we don't budget for the sick and annual leave.
Okay, so.
Again, one is that unless they're a certified teacher, if you're out sick, it doesn't require a substitute.
Right.
So unless it's a serious long-term illness, it doesn't actually cost the district any outflow of cash for you to take a day off for personal leave, unless you're a teacher. If you're a teacher, then we need a substitute. Now, unfortunately, we haven't had that, hasn't been that big of an issue lately because we haven't been able to fully staff our substitutes either. So, but those are considerations.
Okay, so an employee does not take sick days and take personal leave that they're paid for. That's just a bonus for us.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I was wondering. That's it.
Say that, okay,
Thanks.
any other questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Miley. Item 11.3, third quarter pupil services report.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. Dr. Burnett Lyles will share the third quarter pupil services report tonight.
All right. Madam Chair, board members, Ms. Gregory, and Richland 2 community, I am Shalia Burnett Lyle, Director of Student Services, and I have the pleasure of having with me my wonderful colleague, Dr. Vickery, Executive Director of Learning Support Services, and we're here to present on behalf of Mr. Smith, Cleveland Smith, the Chief, the third quarter pupil services report. So I'll just say this for those who are following along. This is standard information that we share each time where we give you comparative data, 4-year trends, and we typically share the quarters as well as the years. So what you have in front of you, the first slide compares the total number of behavioral incidents that we have had in our district. For the public to know, our level 1 infractions tend to be behaviors that can be handled usually within a teacher's classroom, sometimes with the principal, but things like that would include skipping class, not raising your hand while you speak. And as you see in the 22-23 school year, we have had a decrease if you compare those numbers for the third quarter to 21-22 school year. I forgot to say, I always say this, the shaded area, this for those who are following along, that simply reflects when our schools were out on the pandemic. Clearly those numbers are anomalies. So again, one highlight for you to see is that we have gone down in the number of level 1 infractions, and a lot of those are tardies, and you know, we can only give predictions about why, but certainly we suspect that the changing in bail times has factored into that. So level 2 infractions are those that sometimes they often require administrative intervention, and sometimes it may be in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or even recommendations for expulsion. And if you look at our trends, you'll see we're pretty steady in terms of our numbers for the third quarter versus the second quarter. We went up a little bit, but if you look at our numbers for level 2 infractions for last year, you will see we have increased on those infractions. And level 3, as you see, those would be behaviors that are most concerning and typically require a recommendation for expulsion. You'll see we went up a little bit from second quarter, but if you compare the numbers to last year, we're right at even. And that's just a little chart to give you a visual of those numbers broken down by school level, elementary, middle, and high school. So you see that middle school does take up about 50% of our number of infractions currently. Again, this is third quarter. Okay. Now, this second slide would be the number of actual actions as a result of the behaviors. So we break them down by in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and expulsion. Now, there may be other actions that we don't account, right? An administrator may give silent lunch, and that may not be reported on here, but these are items in which we would say that a student may have been removed from their instructional environment for a period of time. So our ISS and OSS numbers align. If you look at the number of behaviors, pretty much you will see that as numbers fluctuate, it is aligning with our ISS and OSS numbers. Okay. Expulsions, it does look like we went down from second quarter to third quarter. I just want to make sure that we understand that when we give number of expulsions, we are counting when the expulsion has finalized. And so it's possible that you have the behavior may have occurred in second quarter, but the expulsion hadn't necessarily finalized. But for purposes of data, you will see again our numbers have decreased a little bit. And as always, we like to give you numbers of infractions. You'll see that we've increased from quarter 1 and quarter 2 in fighting. It's third quarter, right? It's the springtime, so as you see, it's busy, and that is certainly the same for our other, for 21-22 school year. And again, just giving you a visual of our fighting infractions by percentages, and again, you will see our middle school actually takes up the highest percentage of our fighting infractions. So, as always, we like to present to you things that we're doing outside of discipline to address student behaviors. I do want to mention before Dr. Vickery takes over that here within our the umbrella of pupil services, we do believe in a three-pronged approach to addressing. Second is responsive, and that is addressing the behaviors and the crises on site. And then third, and that has been that's come up today in this board meeting, is restorative, because every child deserves to be restored and welcomed back into our district, whether it was welcomed back into the classroom because of an in-school suspension or welcomed back into the school if they were removed from a period of time. So that is our three-pronged approach, and Learning Support Services, a huge department, she'll go through how they cover all three of those approaches. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Vickery.
Make sure I can do this right. Good evening. Good to see you guys. I appreciate being Learning Support Services. I think some of you have heard this term before. It's a term we use in Richland too, that not every school district uses. We didn't make it up. We actually, this is a nationally used term that we don't hear that much in South Carolina, but it's a combination of our people who are what I call the traditional helping professionals in the schools. And I wanted to share our mission statement with you guys tonight, because what we're all about really is reducing barriers to learning, whatever those barriers are. So we believe all students can learn and succeed, and it's our job, we're the ones who are supposed to find and support the conditions that help students remove those barriers and staff figure out a way to do that. So that's what we're all about. Multi-tiered systems of support. We talked about that during another one of these meetings. MTSS really means you're trying to tie the interventions to student needs. First, figuring out what a student needs. Is it a lesser extreme response, a more involved response, or a super involved response? We'll talk about that in just a minute. But everything in LSS takes place within that. So what is LSS? I've been talking about that, and we use that abbreviation, and that's what you'll hear our principals call our teams. Our Learning Support Services teams are really these nurses, psychologists, social workers, our family interveners are on the LSS team. And a lot of our elementary schools, you'll see a parent educator who's also on our LSS teams. And those are the numbers of people we have district-wide in those positions. But so we have 75 and a half-time school counselor somewhere, 37 school nurses, 26 school psychologists. I just wanted to let you know, they are all over the place. And every school has a team of these people who work together. Every school will have at least a part-time school psychologist, at least a part-time social worker. Every school, except I think maybe one center only has a part-time counselor, but otherwise at least one counselor and usually more than one counselor. So we have to, that our teams will really become teams so that they can support each other. And we'll talk a little bit more about exactly what they do, but they meet as a team, they get to know the kids in their schools. This teamwork has really become an important piece of who we are. We have a district leadership team for this group so that we can really provide for those folks in the schools what they need too. And our district leadership is the leaders from all of those groups, counseling, family intervention services. Our homebound services are also on this team, which is an important piece because that group of students is having trouble with either health or mental health issues that are causing their need for homebound. We have a district attendance luncheonist, which is a special project we've started after really all over the country as a result of students having struggles associated with the pandemic. So we're especially working on attendance. That's happening within LSS too. And we claim our district behavior interventionists on our district team, our district leadership team, because they're doing very similar work, even though they're really in the MTSS department. We interface with them a lot with our work. So what do the school teams do? Well, the first thing they're going to do is try to and work with their administration, but they're also going to get to know students and work directly with them and work with parents to try to figure out what students need. They'll do promotion of staff wellness. You know, working with teachers, working with other folks is a part of what we do, improve everybody's functioning. And they'll provide service to colleges, same thing. But we've also really tried to increase the effectiveness of people by cross-training. And this was something we started several years ago. When I first started this work, we weren't really experts in, let's say, suicide risk assessments. And we found we needed to have a greater variety of people who could do those things. So we've cross-trained all those folks that I mentioned earlier in suicide risk assessments, behavior threat assessments, mandated reporting issues that we need everybody to be. Whoever's there that day needs to handle those things on an emergency basis. We've also cross-trained in crisis responding and de-escalation skills, and we've staff members on those same kinds of topics, partners. So what does district leadership do? Well, we're basically supporting all of these people. And we, in addition to that, we're interviewing and training a lot of new professionals. It's a good many folks who are in our areas, and we're trying really hard to retain and recruit new people. We have internship programs in every one of our areas, so we're training the next crop of folks, and we really like for them to be having that experience in Richland too. We are also the district's crisis response team. You've heard us talk a little bit about that. The district leadership is available to schools, and when we go into school there and with the LSS team there, but we'll take the leadership in making sure if there's a discomfort that's happening because of the crisis, we'll take over what they need us to do. This is just the multi-tiered system of support graphic that you see come up frequently. And I just put some things in each one of those tiers that LSS people do on the school level. Tier 1, if you remember, that's things that all students get. And this is where we work on, and we've talked some about this in the safety committee, I know recently, awareness of resources, making sure everybody is aware of what's out there, and developing our school-wide interventions to support behavior, wellness, using our whole child data. In Tier 2, it's those services that some students need and others don't. That would be targeted small group work, sometimes going into classrooms and supporting teachers, behavior recommendations, doing parent groups, providing resources, being on school intervention teams. Tier 3 is even more individualized. That'd be like individual sessions with students, individual program planning, looking at individual needs, maybe individual evaluations, perhaps crisis assessments. And then our Tier 4 really is more for students who have either some kind of disability, a homebound need, and it's an intensely different kind of approach there. Okay, that's really it. I just wanted you guys to know.
Thank you both for the presentation. Board members, go ahead. Mrs. Porter.
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Do you complete any surveys for effectiveness of services with students at schools?
Even feedback from students about how well the counseling sessions?
Yes.
We have Family Intervention Services does a feedback program with their students that they see, and we have data we look at on that.
Okay.
Individual counselors and our small group leaders will also do surveys from students on those kind of things too.
Okay. I was thinking more like for students who perhaps aren't using the services in the school, maybe to find out why that may be, is it accessible, or just to get feedback of why they may not use.
Whole child survey,
Okay.
which was the survey of 3 through 12 this year. We surveyed every kid.
Right.
And then those scales in that survey gave us a lot of information about
Right.
student needs and,
Yes.
and strengths and weaknesses. So that's one of the, knowing what resources are available was a piece of that, those questions too. You don't always know from big surveys like that exactly which students take advantage of services, but it does give us clues into what you're talking about.
So I'm very familiar with that survey, and one of those questions is that I asked about students and how they feel about the environment, and students
that's right.
Weighed heavily on that topic. But it didn't narrow into specifically the support services for students. It's very vague.
Yeah,
And so
it doesn't ask every detail.
Exactly, especially when I look at the middle school percentage. I just really would love to know that those middle school students know where to go and how to get there when I see that big percentage. So it's just something to think about. And then I also had a question about discipline and how it's related to LSS, because I didn't see it on that tier system.
Discipline is really mainly an administrative responsibility. Most of our work has to do with either prevention, responding to individual students who will come to us, and a lot of times there will be an opportunity to, if something that we'll be able to intervene, to work with students to try to resolve a problem, to restore what's going on. Our people get into lots of that. When it's brought to the administration to be a disciplinary issue, that's usually not the step when it's really before then.
Okay, so
it would be follow-up after the disciplinary.
That's where I was going. So we often ask about when it comes to us and students are now at the point where they may go to Blythewood Academy or something like that. A question that always comes up are, do students know how to get family intervention services? Or will they get them? Are they offered? Is it mandatory? Those type of questions. And so that's where I was looking for it on that too, because we often don't know. We don't know that if a student gets sent to suspended or expelled, if they are just dropped off and expected to come back into school and merge with all the students and everything just magically happens.
Family intervention services is required for all kids who go to Blythewood Academy.
Okay.
Now, we also, and there are a bunch of different services that are offered in that. A good many of them attend family groups with, where they're working in groups of families. Some of them also get individual family therapy and individual student therapy. Not all the kids they see are discipline-related situations. They see a lot of kids who are more on the prevention end or having struggles within the school of some other sort that really, so they're not referred from discipline. They see all those kids too. It's a lot of students. But every kid who's gotten to that point is.
And I just wanted to add to that, that any student who has been recommended, if they are returned back to their base school on strict probation, or if they attend Blythewood Academy, they are required to go through some type of counseling, primarily family intervention services. We also have some students who are placed in LRADAC, and then we have a few who have to go through Healthy Choices. In addition, our Pathways to Promotion program, which is fairly new, which is currently for high school students, has an excellent partnership with Family Intervention Services as well. And so that means that any students who are expelled and accepted into the Pathways to Promotion program also have access to Family Intervention Services.
It is intricately. I didn't put it on the tiered thing. I was just picking a few things that we do, but that's a really big piece of that. Sure.
Mrs. Nash?
One, I want to just say thank you so much for coming, and thank you for being a part of Safety and Security Committee and coming and providing input on our first meeting. And one of the things the student representative, was the silent sufferers. And I think because of the pandemic, we have more silent sufferers than anything. So I definitely agree with Ms. Porter. As much that we can put out there for people to know where to get services is really, really important. And the second one may be like somewhat of a curveball, but it's not meant to be, is that there is a lot of issues going on right now with vaping. And it starts really young, and I mean, all the studies show that it changes your molecular, how your brain works, and can turn you into a zombie in a very short time. And I don't know if there's something, I know you have LRADAC for certain things, but is there something that is specifically for vaping, because kids do get addicted to it, they do that, and we do see those infractions happening.
I don't know of any particular interventions designed to address vaping. Do you know?
You're right. Vaping is a major concern around the nation, and it is a growing concern. And for those who are not aware, the vaping industry, a lot of the individual companies target children. They make it kid-friendly. If you go into the store, they have the LED lights. It smells and looks like candy. So with that in mind, it is a major concern. Right now, students who are using vapes, it depends, right? If they truly, based on information received, if there is a suspicion that there is an addiction, then they do go through LRADAC. And LRADAC does have that specialty. There are many students, however, who participate based on peer influence. Unfortunately, we know that's the gateway, however, to addiction. And if it is based more on peer influence, then we tend to send them to Family Intervention Services for effective decision-making. But I do agree that that is an area that we, as a society, really need to keep our pulse on.
Thank you so much.
So true.
I just wanted to add to that with the Juul lawsuit. I think the money that we get has to go into a vaping program. So,
Wonderful. Good opportunity.
Any other questions, comments? Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for your support. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Moving on, item 12, agenda items for next meeting. Mrs. Gregory.
June 13th, for our regular board meeting, on our agenda, we'll have our call to order, approval of agenda, and in executive session, we will have student admission request into adult ed, student appeals, any breach of contracts, employment recommendations, and certified releases. Inspirational moment and pledge of allegiance. We'll have our consent agenda, first public participation, and then voting on any of those executive items that were mentioned. In new business action requested, we have the adoption of a continuing resolution that Dr. Miley explained to us tonight as a precaution. And then agenda items for the next meeting for June 27th. Second, public participation if needed. Also, executive session to be continued if needed. Voting on those executive session items. Board and superintendent comment.
Thank you, Mrs. Gregory. Mrs. McFadden, do you have a comment or
Yes,
question?
on ours, it says 3.4 student permanent expulsion. Does that need to be marked off? I know she didn't read it, but that's what's printed on our.
Tomorrow, when we meet, I think we'll take that off unless there's somebody we don't know about. But thank you. I just saw that too as you were reading through that. So this is just a draft agenda. Is there anything else that anybody would like on next meeting's agenda or on a future agenda?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Washington?
if we can review policy BC, board conduct, and this is in reference to recommendations from the IG committee.
Okay, and would you like it on the next meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay. Will you make a motion to get policy BC put on the agenda?
I know the last time
That was the policy that we just passed on how for board members at our last meeting.
But a part of that was we still would email you to put that information on
Okay,
there.
so if I get 3 emails, or you can just do.
So I'm gonna make a motion to place policy BC for board conduct on the agenda for our next meeting. And I also would like for us to please go back and review that policy so that we have a very clear understanding of how to implement the policy. And I'm not talking about board conduct, I'm talking about the one for the board agenda. Because that means that we're gonna be doing this every board meeting at the end of the board meeting. And I completely understand that we wanted to make sure that we were able to get things prioritized, but that starts with the board chair understanding the board priorities, not us having to make a motion at the end of every meeting to get items on the agenda.
Second.
Well, the second on the motion. Okay, so let's just start with the motion was
We can go
made
ahead and
by
make the
Mrs.
motion,
Washington to
and
put-
then we can proceed to the next
We
item.
can have the discussion. Okay, policy, so the motion was made to put policy BC, board conduct, on the June 13th, 2023 board meeting agenda. And it was seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? I will just add to the discussion, we approved the policy at the last meeting on how to get items added to the agenda. The whole board had, the opportunity to look at it. You'll have a new board chair in July. If the board wants to bring it back up at that time, I'm happy to sit and listen to, the board debate again. But that is the policy and how the board approved the policy to get items on the agenda.
I completely understand that, Madam Chair, but I guess my concern is that we're going to go through this process at the end of every meeting, and that was not the intent of the board. And so our main concern for the agenda was to make sure that items were prioritized, not that at the end of every single meeting, that if we wanted to get something on the agenda, that we would make a motion in order to do that. I rest my case.
Well, and thank you.
very
And this
much.
was a practice that the previous board had. So this is, nothing new. It was just added actually into policy and written. So this was a practice that the board had previous to this new board coming in, having taking its seat. Mrs. Porter.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to add that we did list multiple ways to add items on the agenda, and I think an option would be, instead of assuming that we want to make it as a motion, maybe offering and saying, would you like to make the motion or follow one of the other options to put it on the agenda? Because one of those ways would be, if we're going to prioritize it, you might have to look at all the other things on the list to ensure that you're actually prioritizing it. Because if we just throw everything on the agenda, we're doing exactly what we didn't want to do. So I just think that we had multiple ways to put things on the agenda for that reason. And so that wasn't the only way. So.
All right, well, no, and I appreciate what you have to say, but I hope the board will then now take a look at the policy that we just passed, because the other option is to have 3 emails sent in within 1 fiscal year. That's what the policy now currently reads. So any further discussion? No further discussion? And the motion is correct. Board members, please vote. Can you tell them, she's in favor. Will you please state that just so that they have it on the record? Thank you. So the vote is 7 yes, 0 no. The motion carries. Is there anything else that anybody would like to have added to the June 13th or a future agenda? No further discussion. We'll move on to item 13, public participation, continued if needed. It is not needed. Item 14, executive session continued if needed. May I have a motion to go into executive session?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Trapp.
I move to convene an executive session to discuss or to receive legal advice regarding superintendent compensation, receipt of legal advice regarding employee contracts, and receipt of legal advice regarding a parent grievance.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. McFadden. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 5 yes, 2 no. The motion carries. We'll now convene an executive session. May I have a motion to come out of executive session?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Trapp.
I move that we conclude an executive session at 10:43 and reconvene in public session.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Mrs. Porter to adjourn executive session. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. And the vote is 5 yes, 2 not present. The motion carries. Item 15, voting on executive session items. 15.1, for items as needed, we need a motion for student number 3 for adult education. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Trapp.
I move to approve the student admission request into the district's adult education program for student number 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mr. Trapp and seconded by Dr. Scott to admit student number 3 into adult education. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. Board members, please vote. The motion is correct. And the vote is 5 yes, 2 not present. The motion carries. Item 16.1, Board and Superintendent comments. Mr. Trapp.
It's past my bedtime, so I'm going to just say I thank everybody that was here tonight and participated. Have a good night.
Mrs. Porter.
I wanted to thank our Girl Scouts. They did a fabulous job today. I love seeing all of their badges. And I also wanted to thank our families and staff that have come together to support our students during our end of the year festivities. And also, thank you for all of the pictures and things that you've posted for our seniors and their proms. I have thoroughly enjoyed seeing the pictures, and I don't even know if these seniors and, well, high school students have known, but their grandparents are posting pictures all over social media of how proud they are of their their teenagers in these beautiful gowns and pictures. So it's lovely to see. And also of the award ceremonies that are going on. So all the staff that are behind the scenes that are putting these ceremonies together, thank you so much. It's lovely to see.
Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Mrs. Nash.
Just want to say again, thank you guys for being here tonight, and thank you for the food, but also thank you to all of the staff and administration who helped put together the vision of the Safety and Security Committee. We had a great night last night and got a lot of great feedback, so thank you to everyone who came out and everybody that was on the team. And then, tonight we got basically what I would call a 3 review on Google from our community, and I will say that we're trying to get it together and work things out. So the best way to handle a 3 on a Google review is to address it, let the people know that we're going to work as hard as we can. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you, Mrs. Nash. Dr. Scott.
Yes, I had my information to share, and it's even more important tonight than it was before. I'm going to go back to the late Vince Ford, the late Chip Jackson, Representative Leon Howard, Susan Brill, Representative Andy McDaniel, who was a former school board member, and I think I want to make sure, Melinda Anderson, I think I said that. But I want to say, I remember just a few days ago, I received my 10-year certificate in pen, and I was very excited about that, and had a conversation with a former board member from a different school district. And one thing that they said when I told them that I'm so thankful
for these people, and I want to make sure I didn't forget anyone, so I'm going to start back over. The late Vince Ford, Representative Leon Howard, who actually served on Richland 1 School Board before, Representative Andy McDaniel, who formerly served on Fairfield County, Susan Brill, who was here on Richland 2, the late Chip Jackson, who served on Richland School District 2, and Melinda Anderson. They were mentors to me. When I got on this board, I had 24 years of education experience. And I was the only person on here with educational experience, but I was still not an expert because they were experts on the board. So a quote came to me a couple days ago when I was so excited about my 10-year pen, and it said, if you have a degree of humility about you, you have the ability to take advice, to be coachable and teachable. And then I thought about the late Vince Ford, who said this, and he had so many great quotes, and many of you know them. But the one that really stood out to me is, he said, experience teaches only the teachable. I'm gonna say that again. Experience teaches only the teachable. And I pray to God that my colleagues look at the experience that I have on this board. Although we all have different experiences in different areas, but I'm the veteran board member, and I have background experience and relational experience with different things that they have no knowledge or no concept on. So I hope that many of us, including myself, that we go back and realize that experience teaches only the teachable. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. Mrs. Gregory.
Thank you, Ms. Agostini. First, I'd like to congratulate our track and field state champions. 4 out of 5 Richland 2 high schools won a track and field state championship this last weekend. The Westwood and Ridgeview girls track teams tied for the 4A state championship. The Blythewood girls team won the 5A state championship. The Spring Valley boys team won back-to-back state championships. We also had 15 individual track event champions representing all 5 Richland 2 high schools. Congratulations to them all. Spring Valley High School senior Kathy Tang is receiving one of the highest honors for high school seniors. Last week, U.S. Secretary of Education announced the selection of Tang as a 2023 U.S. Presidential Scholar. Tang is one of 2 students in South Carolina and 161 in the nation to receive this honor. So we are thrilled. Chosen from a talent pool of more than 15,000 outstanding finalists, 2 students in Richland 2 were selected as National Merit Scholarship winners. Stephanie A.
Babinick. I taught her how to swim.
Thank you. And Madison K. Hone, both of Spring Valley, are scholarship recipients. Both are 2 of 36 seniors in South Carolina receiving these scholarships. So again, those are huge honors. I want to thank all the folks that have been involved in our many concerts in the spring, our awards and recognition ceremonies and promotion ceremonies. Big graduation days are approaching. We are expecting tentatively around 2,041 seniors. Next Wednesday, May 31st, at 10:30, I'll have the joy of presenting certificates of completion to students who receive special needs services and in their graduation ceremony held here at R2i2. W.R. Rogers Adult Continuing and Technology Education Center, their graduation ceremony will take place next Wednesday evening at 7 at Spring Valley Auditorium, and high school graduations will conclude the week. Commencement exercises will begin at Blythewood High School at noon and Richland Northeast at 4 on June 1st at the Colonial Life Arena. June 2nd graduation ceremonies begin at 8 a.m. with Spring Valley, Westwood at noon, Ridgeview at 4, also at the Colonial Life Arena. Graduation ceremonies for our public will be streamed live on the website. So we're excited about all these celebrations as we wrap up the school year. Last day is Thursday, June the 2nd. Have a great closing to our teachers and staff members.
Thank you, Mrs. Gregory. And I first want to start off and just thank Dr. Scott for filling in for me. I've been sort of missing in action for the past week and a half with family obligations, so I was sorry to miss the Junior Scholar Dinner and also the Academic Scholar Dinner. And this is the last time I'm going to say it, but one of the family events that I had was my son just graduated from medical school on Saturday. And along with him, I'd also like to recognize there were several other Richland 2 students there getting their MDs as well. And there was Jason Erno from Spring Valley, class of 2015, Sydney Reed Jackson from Arnie, the class of 2015, and Abby Truitt from Blythewood High School, class of 2015. And finally, Breland Green, she got her doctorate in physical therapy, and she is from Spring Valley High School, class of 2016. And I'll just leave everybody with, it's our last meeting before, I was going to say spring break, but summer break. So everybody, please, employees and students, please have a happy and safe summer. Have a great evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Porter.
I move that we adjourn the May 23rd, 2023 regular board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made by Mrs. Porter and seconded by Mr. Trapp to adjourn the meeting. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Board members, let's do a hand vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? There are 5 yeses, 0 noes. The motion carries. The meeting's adjourned.